Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 166. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge on the comics forums, and I'm joined as always by co-host Jim. I sit in this corner every single show, on a chair that isn't comfy, I want you to know. You ask why I don't switch. It's so my back will feel fine. It's because I'm much like Larfies, and telling you it's all mine. Mine, mine, mine. So says the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin Orange Construct.
How's it going, eh? Nice.
Yeah, that's why I said you had to read the Green Lantern first, because I figured you'd be in an Orange Lantern moon because of it. This episode, we're going to continue our discussion on Long Halloween. And hopefully we're going to have a chance to get to some more of our speeding bullets. We've got an awful lot of stuff that you and I want to talk about over the next couple weeks. Jim, our sponsors for this episode are DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, if you can sneak it in before the end of the month, Billy Batson, The Magic of Shazam, number 7. Written by Art Baltazar and Franco. Art and cover by Brian Vaughns and Kevin Branch. Billy and his sister Mary are off on another all-new amazing adventure as they fight side by side, as well as with each other, against the robotic might of the frightening Mr. Atom. Regularly $250, 40% off only $150. You can still get a comic for $150. Tiny Titans number 19, also by Art and Franco, with art and cover by Art Baltazar. Love is in the air and the Titans treehouse. Plasmus and Bumblebee are hanging out, and the other Titans are starting to notice. And Robin wants to write his school report, but for some reason the girls won't leave him alone. Plus, the return of the Titans Ape Club. Eek! Regularly $250, again, 40% off, only $150. So for $3 you can get 2 comics.
I know. Bumblebee and Plasmith. Okay, I gotta see that one.
Yeah. I love Tiny Titans and Billy Batson, The Magic of Shazam, which is why I wanted to do a little ad real quick on this Johnny DC line, because they are 2 books that I look forward to each and every release.
Yeah, they're fun reads, and it's, one I do get to share with my nephew, but I'm still reading it and still collecting it. I buy a copy for him, and I keep a copy for me. It's a fun read, and I've actually gone back and reread some of these things. It's
again,
when you've had a bad day at work, Tiny Titans is a great way to lift your spirits up before you dive into some serious reading.
And the depth in Billy Batson, The Magic of Shazam, there's a lot of story told in every single issue of that book. They're 2 of my favorite books.
I think I mentioned that I'm now looking to pick up some of the Powers of Shazam stuff, because I'm reading this, into this character, and I'm like, I wonder what, because everyone talks about this kid, who, he's the eternal little boy in this superhero body and all that, and I want to read those stories.
You're starting to like Billy.
I'm starting to like Billy, yeah.
DCB Service is your source for your pre-order needs, and coming this week should be, I think by the end of the week, the brand new books, too. So I'm always excited for that. Yeah, see what's coming out next and what kind of deals we can get. But thank you, DCBService.com, for supporting us. We actually are going to be recording this week with Mandy, a.k.a. Super Mandy from the forums, Absolute Superman for tomorrow. We're going to be breaking that up into chunks like we've been doing with Long Halloween, because it's a rather big offering. So anybody that's planning to get that, we're going to be releasing that like mid-July. We're recording it early because I've got a crazy month coming at the end of July, and with editing I want to get those shows ready a little bit early, but we are going to be recording those ahead of time, and they'll definitely be aired in mid-July, and I'm really excited to talk about that book, because it's Superman issues 204 to 215, writer Brian Azzarello, art Jim Lee and Scott Williams, and it's just a gorgeous looking book. It's 12 issues of For Tomorrow. I'm curious particularly to talk with you about it though, Jim, because it's a book that I think it's a book that will lead to some very interesting discussions, to say the least. Yeah. But it's nice because InStockTrades.com has supported us with $75 is the irregular price for the Absolute, 47% off, only $39.75. The trade paperbacks, Volume 1 and Volume 2, are $14.99 each, 47% off, only $7.94. And I do appreciate that they gave our listeners both options, because not everybody's going to be able to afford to go into the Absolute. So they were like, hey, give them either option, and that's great. I also want a DCBS, and I'll be talking more about it at the end of the show. They have their 10th anniversary. and they're doing a big celebration at their store. So in the end of this episode, I'll give specific information about that. But I want to congratulate DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com on that anniversary, because they've been wonderful sites for me, and it's one of the reasons why I'm able to buy the amount of comics that I do is because of those amazing discounts. So thank you for supporting us and the show and our listeners. Now, Jim, what kind of a podcast are we?
Well, Sean,
this better be good with the build-up.
Yeah. We're Raging Bullets, a DC spoiler podcast. We go in depth to the books we're reviewing on the show. So if you haven't read the books we are reviewing, you may want to come back later on, because this is Raging Bullets, the DC show. We go in depth with plotline, story twists, and whatnot. Raging Bullets with Dr. Norge and say whatnot.
Dude, if this is American Idol, I'd call in all my times to vote you off. I'd become like Survivor. I would vote for everybody else so you'd be gone.
I had to do a tribute to Michael Jackson, and that was my Thriller.
Is that
tribute.
What that was?
Yes, that was Thriller, dude.
Really?
Raging Bullets, Thriller night.
That's not Thriller either.
Yeah, it is. That's Thriller.
Wow.
That's why I started laughing, because every time I sang it in practice, I was like, oh my God, I'm just so off-key and just so horrific that I'm like, I almost didn't do it. I'm like, oh, F it. I'll throw myself under the bus.
You were like busting up before you even started, which I thought was
I
really
knew this one was going to be a bad one.
It was.
Hold on, but this was better than my Billie Jean.
Did you have a little bit of, what was your Billie Jean like?
No. This was good compared to Billie Jean, okay?
All right, so you want to just get into Long Halloween?
Let's just get into Long Halloween.
All right.
Holy caffeine!
That was funny. All right, anyway. Jim, Batman Long Halloween, Part 2 of our 3-part discussion. We're going to be talking today about issues 5 through 9. The writer was Jeff Loeb, the artist Tim Sale, colors by Gregory Wright, letters by Richard Starkings and Comicraft. Chuck Kim is the assistant editor. Archie Goodwin was the editor. Now, Jim, I actually reread this again during this week to prep for this.
Oh, yeah.
The most sincere compliment I can give to this book is it's like a good film. I can reread it again and again and focus on different aspects and just really enjoy it. Like, there's certain characters that I'll focus on a little bit more, especially when I'm thinking of what's going on outside of the book, trying to get into the characters' heads and things like that. This has really just been a great read for me.
I know, this has been literally a multiple read-through, and not just for the show. I'm really just enjoying this, and I keep talking about just the absolute. We keep saying absolute Long Halloween, even though you don't have to read the absolute, no. But there is just something about this absolute. I love sitting down and just... just slight flip, the heavier paper. It feels like a tome that is worthy of just, it's like an enchanted book that I'm reading. It's something I just really delve into. This. I get caught up into it, man. It's a mystic tome.
When you say enchanted book, it's like I imagine turning the pages and go gling gling. Or it glistens or something.
Well, Jim, there's maybe a little,
That's more Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Jim, we're going to kick off with issue 5, which was the Valentine's Day issue. The cover with the cat and the bat head with the claw marks was pretty cool, but here's a dumb thing. I just noticed the plant growth surrounding them to represent poison ivy. Now, don't get me wrong, I saw it before, but I always thought it represented Halloween flowers that you would give to someone. I mean, not Halloween, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Valentine's Day
flowers. I'm thinking long Halloween. But Valentine's Day flowers that you would give to someone special. I never made the connection until this read-through. I don't know why.
Okay, here to make you feel better.
Uh-huh.
I never made the connection until you just mentioned it now.
Yeah, but it was the covers are really cool that way. You know what caught me this time? The last page of the issue, they have that wonderful shot of Ivy with Bruce, and it's the same Ivy that's growing around her that is surrounding them. So I don't know. It took me this long to. There's somebody who's listening, going like, "Guys, I caught that the first time."
Yeah.
I always felt that Alfred could hold his own and was one of the people responsible for Batman's training. It's funny how he looks so much more intimidating in this opening sequence shot due to what I've seen from him recently, though, in Trinity and Outsiders. You know, in Trinity, when he has that role where it's in the alternate Earth and we get to see Alfred kind of as the adventurer.
We get the Beagle, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. To see him doing that and then what we see in Outsiders now, because he's really impressive in that as well, has really influenced my enjoyment of him in this. Do you take Harvey as having an inferiority complex when dealing with those with wealth? Or is it just a lack of respect because of the sacrifices he's made to earn his living for the city? What's going on?
I think we got a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Yeah.
There is some uncomfortableness that he has with the big money like that. You know, and I think part of it is he doesn't want to come across as weak. You know, you're sitting there and he's with Gordon, and Gordon's like, "Oh, you never been out to Wayne Manor," you know, kind of like that. And he's like, "Oh, you know," just kind of blowing off as if it's not that big of a deal not to go to Wayne Manor. Everybody goes to Wayne Manor. I got more important things to do, or you know, that type of stuff. So he's got to, you know, kind of puff out his chest a little bit, right? You know, especially because sometimes when you're dealing with a cop, you know, you kind of, you know, they can be you're always being watched and you're always being studied, especially the good cops. You know, investigator like Gordon, he's always looking at you and he's always making an assessment and seeing what you are. And, you know, Dent would know that. So Dent never, you know, he's probably in his mind thinking, I don't want to come across weak. I don't want to come across as looking like I'm boyish or, you know, I'm just the kid here. So he's got to, you know, kind of step up a little bit.
Jim Gordon trying to maintain professionalism when dealing with him was really a great contrast. It's always something I felt was a strong quality of the character, so I was glad to see it from him here, because he really talks to Alfred in a completely different way. Even with Dent calling the place a dump, talk about Alfred, he doesn't lose his composure. As the butler, that's just as much of an insult to him as it is to Bruce because of the fact that he takes care of the place, and I really respected that moment. Dent, when he was invited to the parties, I don't like dressing up. Interesting considering where he goes.
Right, yeah.
Bruce respects Dent, though, and would invite this ally. And I got to comment on the artistic work done when this room was drawn. The sheer size and scale of the curtains shows how tall the ceiling is. Wayne Manor feels very immense here, and this is how I always pictured it. Yeah. You know, as just being this awesome, incredible place to visualize on the inside.
You know, I've been to a couple nice houses that we've had. A bunch of our friends have some really cool houses. And it's like, yeah, you know. And a friend of my folks, you know, they are caretakers for this one doctor who is, you know, easily within the billions. You know, we're talking a couple, you know, 100-acre estate and all this stuff. And they're the caretakers, so he does a lot of the, you know, the physical work around the house and all that. And we were visiting them and hanging out. And, you know, you talk about having a guest house. You know, their guest house is as large, if not larger, than, you know, anything we've ever seen. And that's just the guest house. But one time they were having a party and they were moving some heavy tables around, so they needed the guy to help move. And, you know, we were over there visiting him. I'm like, oh, sure, we'll help out. I tell you, I walked in this house, my jaw hit the ground. Wow. It was this massive, huge expanse that was like easily, you know, 3 floors high, you know, going up, you know, then they had this nice winding staircase that I would, you know, kind of picture out of Gone with the Wind type thing. This house was just this amazing thing. And I usually try to be just the everyday average Joe, not to impress with money. I had to say I was just like, and I was worried where I was stepping. I was like, should I take off my shoes? I don't want to do. And it was one of those things where you just see this massive type of house. And just when I was reading this last time, I was reminded of that situation and how I felt. And I'm thinking, I wonder if that's how Harvey's feeling. Because when I was going through that time, all we were doing was we were showing up, we were helping them move over the dining room table, and then we were going to leave the house. And that was going to be it. But just going there to possibly arrest the owner of the house, it would be just a huge, huge possible, you know, talk about home court advantage. You know, Bruce Wayne right there being questioned in Wayne Manor would have the ultimate home court advantage, just because you would walk in and you would have to be impressed by just the size and magnitude of that house.
And there's an insecurity element to Harvey that I noticed in that one, that I thought was particularly interesting to note in that sequence. I enjoyed that a great deal. When Alfred mentions Bruce is out with the ladies as a cover story, it's some great tap dancing because it's Valentine's Day and the billionaire playboy persona.
I know, that was just a perfect cover. That, it's one of those things you didn't even have to think about. It just naturally rolled off, and it was a great way to get them to leave because they're thinking in their head, heck, he's never gonna show up again.
And that is what's more important there, because when the Falcone connection comes up, Alfred realizes he needs them out of there, but he remains calm and works on Gordon. This is great because Harvey is so driven to obsession at this point. Alfred chose to throw the wife comment out to the one who was the most rational. And there was a distinction between the way Harvey was behaving and reacting to the situation and Jim.
Yeah. And it was funny, when I first was reading it, I was thinking the whole time the Two-Face persona is coming out, and I'm thinking that, this is, there's that darker side to him. But I was thinking a lot, especially this sequence, was the inexperience versus the experienced veteran. And even when, Dent throws out the Falcone, you can just see Gordon go, what the heck are you doing? And it's a classic investigation and interrogation maneuver. You don't throw out your ace first. You don't throw out the big guns immediately. You build up to that. You feel through, you ask some basic questions. You just lay some groundwork. You get some comfortability going on between you and the subject. And before you even start hitting with the big stuff, because if you open up with the big guns, they shut up. And they completely clam up, and you lose any chance of getting any type of valid information. It was a very classic rookie thing to do.
It's the obsession with justice that he has, though, too. At all costs. Because we see that more and more as this story goes on. And in the issues we've seen already, the big problem with him is he will cross lines that Gordon won't, because he's obsessed with his impression on what justice is. And that does become, even the coin, when it eventually becomes a part of his life, the coin is, in his eyes, justice. You throw that up into the air, and it is the fates deciding, your sentence. Do you live? Do you survive? What is justice and what is fair? It's crazy with that guy. I'm not saying that he's right. I'm not saying that I even believe it. I don't. But he is very skewed and obsessed to a certain end, and we see that obsession becomes a big thing with him as it goes on. I love the character.
Oh yeah, this is, and I'm
not even doing him justice at the moment when I'm rambling, because there's more that I think in this story is revealed as it goes on that'll explain this more clearly than I am. I'm kind of rushing through it at the moment because we're going to talk a lot about him as we go on.
Yeah, it's this is a really cool Harvey Dent story that we're getting to flesh out. It's not just a cool Batman story; it's a cool Harvey. There's some cool Jim Gordon moments in there. There's some really sweet Batman stuff going on. But yeah, this is a definite, solid Harvey Dent story that if you're a fan of the character, this is a must-read.
I think a lot of the reason why Bruce likes him so much is a lot of the flaws that Harvey has too, though. It's a lot of the stuff that ultimately would have led to his downfall, I think, either way. Although there's points later on where I question maybe if he'd known certain things, he might have never fallen to that point. I don't know. It is, though, because of the fact that I think he's such a driven's probably a good point. Bruce respects how driven he is because he is equally as driven. And I think that's something he relates to with Harvey, whereas Jim's his conscience. Jim, in many ways, is what Alfred is to him. Whereas Harvey, he can kind of see a lot of himself and where he's at in Harvey, and I think that's where the relationships are working for Bruce in that way. He respects Jim in a different way than he does Harvey. And I like that. I like that relationship. Of course, Bruce isn't out with the ladies. He is confronting Falcone at the cemetery. Jim, this sequence is interesting. Bruce is trying to push the mob boss to see the death and havoc he was causing by connecting the loss of his son to the many men, and young and old, who he has killed in order to, or had killed himself. And I liked this whole sequence.
And it's not even just the people he's killed. It's the lives that have been changed due to the death.
Sure.
Because he even says he was a civilian. He wasn't involved in this. Well, how many people who weren't involved with your life have suffered because of your actions? the collateral damage, if you want to call it, is the military term. There's, no innocent bystanders. Some people will say there is a lot of people surrounding any type of criminal element that's going to get hurt, whether it's a direct gunshot aimed at the bad guy that just happens to hit them, or because you see the person going down, you witness a murder. Maybe that would change, the death of like innocence when you see, a life being taken, or even dealing with the fact that, the person who was the principal breadwinner of your family is a drug dealer. They're killed. Now all of a sudden that family has no money coming in. So right there, boom, you have, direct reaction from what's going on. There's no such thing as just the soldiers getting hurt. There are a lot of innocents. There's a lot of collateral damage. There's a lot of people associated and directly and indirectly connected to these things that are getting hurt through this business. And I love the fact that Bruce was bringing that into him, saying that, yeah, your son wasn't, a button man. He wasn't killing people, but you know what? He was connected to this life. And the only way you can protect those around you is not to be connected in any way, shape, or form. So, cut your ties. You got to do what's right. And I thought that was just a cool, just Batman presence.
I'm asking because Catwoman cuts this off. Do you think Bruce planned to keep going with this as a way to break him down? Maybe get info from him? Or do you think he was trying to help him think in a different way and to see things in a different way through that death, connecting him more to his victims? What do you think he was trying to do?
This was just the beginning of what he had planned.
Yeah. I wish it would have been great to see like a what if.
Yeah, what if Catwoman hadn't shown up? And just part of me thinks that it was the beginning of maybe seeing if there is a possibility of a connection to him. Maybe through the sun, maybe through the pain, you can, turn someone around. I don't know. I think Bruce is thinking, let me see what I get when I start, poking at these painful memories for this guy. Let's see if there's really is actual emotion there. Yeah, he's sitting there and saying how he misses his son. He's upset with the death of his son, but is he really upset? Is that just the crocodile tears? Well, I don't know. He's at the graveyard at night. That's usually not faking it. That usually shows some genuine some genuine feelings there. So we got some genuine feelings of remorse and anger. Now, is it remorse or is it anger? Is it he's sitting there crying out for vengeance, saying, I'm going to kill the SOB who did this to you? Or is it he's sitting there saying, why did this happen to my son? What did I do? And I think Bruce was studying him, seeing what he could get from him, seeing which way to play the angle. If he's after revenge and, there's no true remorse there was just anger, then you're going to play it a completely different way. But if there was actual honest and true remorse, Bruce is going to play it a different route. I think this was just the beginning of the cat and mouse. I said earlier with investigations and interrogation, you start with just you don't hit with the bombshells. You don't hit with the big guns first. You start building on it. Now, Bruce was building on the anger and the rage. And that was the emotional connection he was going to get with him. Not, the, hey, I'm your buddy friend thing. That ain't going to work. He's the Batman. He's fear and intimidation. So he's going to build on. He's not going to be able to scare this mob boss, but he can enrage him. He can get the emotions flying. He can, maybe generate some true and honest feelings, and who knows where it could go from there. But Catwoman does her thing and she shows up, and I kind of laughed because she was thinking, well, thanks for, is that your way of saying thank you? And he's like, you didn't think I could get a gun away from him? And I love that, the fact that Bruce is like, hello, you didn't help me.
The next batch of issues did convince me. We talked about it last part of this discussion. Bruce started to know who Catwoman is under the mask. I think this is some of the reasons why. Because there's dialogue that Catwoman says in later issues that matches what Selina's saying to Bruce. Yeah. And a detective like Batman wouldn't miss those things. I'm not saying I thought it was an interesting discussion point because I think the question mark, there's an argument that could be made that he doesn't know yet. And there's an argument that could be made that maybe this is what clued him in. There's a lot of ways of looking at this, and it is an interesting discussion point because it's never really revealed.
Yeah,
I could see it either way very comfortably.
Yeah, I definitely think at the beginning of this, he didn't know who she was, and by the end, he started having his suspicions. He started looking, and I don't think you would never see a facial expression change when she says the things, but he notices her repeating, different things that she was said to Selena Kyle as Catwoman and vice versa.
Do you think some of it could be denial, too, because of the fact that there is an attraction to Selena? Like, that subconsciously, deep down, he does know, but...
Yeah, kind of like the whole Lois Lane thing where she was blocking who Clark was. Only, I
wouldn't compare those two, because I think she, because of who Clark is, kind of the bumbling guy around the office, it kind of threw her off the trail. I think in this case, I don't think there's anything other than the fact that Bruce has an attraction to Selena, that he might not accept that he has one to Catwoman.
If it was anybody other than Batman, I would say yes.
Mm-hmm.
But because
that's why I guess that's why I'm even questioning it. Yeah.
This is Batman. Come on, he noticed those things. He filed them away, and he's just now verifying in his head whether his hypothesis is correct. They are one and the same.
Bruce knows there is a reason she keeps turning up, and this plays heavily into Loeb and Sale's Catwoman When in Robe mini. And I do recommend Dark Victory. Both of these, I know I talked about it last time we did this discussion, but if you like any of these storyline threads that have been going throughout this, these are direct sequels to this, and you really should follow up on them. Because we never really do find out why Catwoman's doing this in this story. That is saved for later.
Yeah, I do want to find that out.
The transition is really well done, with Catwoman and Batman hand in hand to Selena and Bruce in a very different way. The lip leads to her flirting with him again, which is cut short by the flower from Ivy, because she cuts his lip back when they're having their discussion on the roof. And this story is an important first because we got to see that these villains grow into more power within Gotham. It's a transition from being bizarre criminals in a world ruled by mob bosses to them becoming the bosses themselves. In the current Gotham, the bosses are like Kingpin and Two-Face. And, if you looked at stories like No Man's Land, even the Joker was a boss in his own area. I think this is why this story is so great, because it feels like it defines major moments in Gotham's history that seem timeless, that seem to fit into today's storytelling. Vernon is on the take by Sal Maroni. Gotham's corruption reinforced, adding meaning to the isolation that Gordon and Dent feel, because who can they rely on other than each other? It seems like every time they rely on somebody, they turn out to be in the pockets and on the take, and that's their world, and that's been their city.
It was funny because if there was ever any guy who I would say would be on the take, it was Vernon. He had that little Weasley look to him that you just like, come on, he's got to be on the take. Look at him, it's like when you see the the 6'7" big muscle bad guy sitting on a plane, following the hero. Okay, yeah, that's a bad guy. That's got to be a henchman. Who else would it be? It's that type of obvious look to him.
I also felt a little bad for Vernon, though, because you got the impression just looking at him, he's always been the little guy longing to belong. And just the slightest thing, I think, would make, as long as you made him feel like he was part of a group and valuable or something. I mean, in this case, the money did it, but the way Maroni talks to him, he does treat him like he's somebody valuable.
But here's the thing, so did Dent.
I know.
Harvey, was really cool with him, saying, "Oh, Vern, what you doing there so late? Come on, man, you got to go out there, hit the nightlife, have fun." That type of. He was being buddy with him. He was being.
So
a good guy.
So this is totally financially driven.
Yeah, this is totally financially driven. This is a greedy little.
Yeah. Maroni now knows that Dent feels he's the weak link and is targeting him. This is why it's so hard to get a good DA in Gotham. How do you get inspired to clean up a city when your own coworkers, your own assistants turn on you? I mean, Vernon just made Dent a target of Maroni. He was already on their radar, but Vernon now made it personal. It does make me very intrigued for Kate Spencer as the DA. Lots of storytelling can come from that role, and this kind of just made me say, wow, you can really do a lot with a DA in Gotham. In storytelling in a different way than you can do something with like a Jim Gordon even.
Yeah, I know. But here's the thing I'm wondering. I still just play out, when the first attempt on Kate's life, she's going to be able to deal with it a lot different than any other DA before.
Oh, I know.
And that's something I'm really looking forward to, seeing her throw down with some bad guy who comes, some second-rate thug is going to come at her and she's just going to kick the crap out of him. Everyone's going to be going, whoa, where'd that come from?
But I think those situations are what makes it so interesting, because you can do and play out all those games with Kate, and you can see her handle them. I think what's going to also be interesting, Ramsey's got to eventually become a target.
Yeah, even though he's on the other side of the country, that's, it's only, the West Coast. It's not that far away. It's not like he's on another planet or something.
Right. Holiday strikes again and kills. Now, were those Falcone's men or Maroni's? I guess from the dialogue, I couldn't tell if it was Falcone's men stopping off to get warm or Maroni's. And it works either way, so it wasn't like a big deal. I guess I was more thinking it was both, that there was Falcone's men on the outside and Maroni's men on the inside, because of the fact that Falcone is so convinced that Maroni's against him. I don't know.
Now, which guys? You're talking the guys in the car?
The guys in the car.
Yeah, I thought those were Maroni men.
Okay.
I thought.
Outside of his own restaurant.
Yeah, because
they were afraid to. Do you think now they were nervous to go in because Maroni would want them outside?
Yeah, Maroni wants them outside as well as inside. And like, come on, we don't need to be outside. Look at we have an army around here. There's nothing going to go wrong here. We're good to go.
So they weren't saying that because Falcone would be upset that they were inside Maroni's restaurant.
Right.
Okay. Because I took it when I was reading it, one time I took it that they were afraid that Falcone would be upset that they were inside Maroni's place, like, consorting with the enemy family. And I don't know. I guess I took it both ways.
Well, the fact that and the main thing for me is the fact that they call him Mr. Maroni. So that level of respect, by putting the Mr. Maroni.
And if they were Falcone's men, they would just call him Maroni because they aren't associated with him.
Right.
That makes sense. Holiday strikes again and kills. And Maroni vows vengeance on Holiday because of this. I mean, people were dead in his restaurant. This is an important thread because Falcone, Maroni, Gordon, Dent, Batman all now have reasons to seek out Holiday. It leads to multiple suspects and multiple people brought in to assist along the way. I think this works because it allows for some of the reasons that the killer got away with so much. That and the switch.
Yeah.
The switch, I think, throws a major wrench because I think they're all seeing the correct clues, but then things divert and they don't realize that they've diverted, which is, I think, making the question mark.
Yeah, and you also get a little locked in on, once you have one primary suspect, that's what you're thinking, you kind of got the blinders on. And we definitely see that. And I got to admit, I saw it as I had the blinders on because, as I said, from the beginning, I was saying, this is the birth of Two-Face, and I'm like, oh, yeah, this has got to be, the dark personality of Harvey that's, building before Two-Face comes out and all that stuff. And then later on, I do a switch when somebody else is caught and, who admits to being the Holiday Killer. I'm like, oh, why didn't I see this? Oh, I'm an idiot. And then I get the final swerve and I'm like, I didn't see that. I'm an idiot. It was just, and that's one of the things about this I loved was that I kept, every time they kept revealing who the changes and the swerves, I was like, oh my God, why did that? You go back and reread it and you're just like, oh.
And a lot of the reason that it looks like Harvey could be argued the same reason that it looked like Ray Palmer in Identity Crisis. The clues would point in his direction for certain reasons. Harvey and Jim both have some sweet moments with their wives. And it's tragic because I actually grow fond of these relationships with each reading. I like Gordon and Dent. And I like them so much that I can't help but root for them to have happy lives. But also their wives are pretty well developed in here too, that you can't help but feel some connection to them as well.
Wives, and you just
especially Gilda.
Yeah, Gilda. I wish we'd see more of Gilda.
The huge doors and windows compared to the shadowy figure of Bruce. I have seen so many designs of Wayne Manor, and my favorites are always when the artists make it look impressive. It doesn't always have to be this size and scope. I love a lot of the various interpretations of Wayne Manor because some artists have gotten really clever with this facility. It doesn't always have to be huge, but there's something classic that is needed. And I think that's something, no matter what era we've seen Wayne Manor, there's something classic in the way that really great artists do this, and this is a great example of that.
It's the old school Gothic, impressive, money and power. As I said, ultimate home court advantage. That's any truly just magnificent house like that has that type of feel to it. They joke around saying Washington D.C. was designed so that it would intimidate visiting dignitaries. As you lead up and going right to the White House, it's supposed to be laid out to impress and and just kind of put people at, a little bit on their guard, a little bit backed up, a little bit in awe when they finally get to meet the president. So it's, the same type of thing can be said for Wayne Manor, even though it was never their intention to, impress people, but it is in a way when you look at, the wealthy, they want to have that house that people say, whoa, look at that. They want to have the TV crews come in and say, lifestyles of the rich and famous, or, MTV Cribs, whichever of the two shows you prefer. They want that, that status of, look at me, look how cool I am, look at how awesome my house is.
Bruce's trance at ignoring Alfred, which I'm sure has happened before in a driven moment, now backfires as he's under control of Ivy. I wondered at first why Alfred missed it, but then I was like, well, okay, this kind of makes sense. There is a lot of... I will say, my only criticism with this is when Ivy starts to become more involved, when she's actually in Wayne Manor, how did Alfred not catch that? We'll have to talk about that as this goes on, because, and I'm sure you've got a point to this. It's kind of more of like a looming question that we've got to discuss. Was she just? I guess was she just really good at covering her tracks? Either way, it was a great ending to a very cool issue. I really liked how this issue was developed. And let's jump into St. Patty's Day issue 6. Using Ivy's hair as the shamrocks was a very cool
nice
visual.
Oh yeah.
The opening scene with the daughter being free is very cinematic. I don't know why, but her shadowy image walking out of the penitentiary reminds me of The Exorcist a little bit. I don't know.
Well, yeah, I can see that. With the one priest walking, carrying the bag, and all
the famous scene that you see there. I don't know why. It just had that kind of cinematic connection to me. This book, I will say, all the way through it, there were a lot of moments that felt like a lot of my favorite films, and I did like the movie style visuals of this one. Sophie Falcone. Now, there is a girl you don't mess with. She just looks very powerful and very impressive in her presentation. Poison Ivy works her magic, and Bruce allows Falcone money into the bank. This sequence to me is really important because Bruce has been about control. He honed himself into this perfect symbol to try and change Gotham, so people don't feel helpless like he did as a child. Now, much of what is going on around Gotham is making him feel violated. Falcone's increasing hold on the city is a violation of his goals. Ivy violated him. Even Holliday's identity is part of that. In order for him to achieve his ultimate goal, the extreme variables of Gotham need to be under some form of control. I think he felt like he's been making progress, but now it's heading in the other direction. And I think this continuing to fight on to believe in Gotham's potential and to believe in Jim Gordon and Harvey Dent are ways that he keeps going. He keeps finding those little threads to keep digging himself up when Gotham falls to its lows. Because this isn't the only time we've seen Gotham fall to this point. No Man's Land, great example of a storyline where it's done this. Cataclysm, the story with Legacy, with Contagion, all that stuff. Gotham's had some very dark moments where Bruce has had to keep clawing himself back up. Nightfall is another great example of a man rebuilding himself. And I do think that these are stories where he gets torn down and you see him dig himself back up that are really impressive.
Now, here's a funny thing, and well, it's funny to me, and there'll probably be a couple of people who listening to this who may find the humor in this. But when Bruce, basically, said, "Hey, we're gonna have Falcone's money coming in and all that," and you see the one guy's eyes light up because he's just seeing ka-ching, ka-ching, dollar signs of this massive account coming in. One of the things I do is stop stuff like that from happening. Mm-hmm. We're the anti-money laundering unit. We investigate, clients, big clients like this that are coming in. We would know that Falcone is, this massive bad guy, and we would just, there's like various committees within a bank to prevent one person from allowing this. How long have those been around, though, Jim? Well, that's the thing. That was where my first thought started throwing all this stuff out, and the laws have been around for a while, but they were never really strictly enforced, or it was the government really didn't crack down on things until 9/11.
Right.
Once 9/11 happened, that's when the anti-money laundering laws, the terrorist financing laws, all these things, my job basically was created because of 9/11 and because banks, looked at the dollar sign and the amount of money that the clients are bringing in and not where did that money come from. The whole know your customer laws and regulations that are now in effect weren't around back then. But my first gut reaction was, what? He couldn't do that. He'd have to clear it through the audit committee. He'd have to, and I just started rattling off all these different people that he'd have to clear through. And I caught myself, I go, hold on, Jim. One, it's a comic book, so relax. But two, those laws went around when this took place. But I kind of chuckled, it brought out that emotional response. It brought out, the investigator in me as I'm just reading through this, just pointing out all the little details and the flubs and whatnot. But yeah, I don't know.
Really though, because
they weren't. Actually, they weren't really. So you got to give credit to the, to the writing team because banks were doing this type of stuff. Just ask the people who used to work for Riggs Bank, which no longer exists after they failed to report certain activity. So it can nowadays, something like this would never happen, but back then, this was a common occurrence. This was something that the criminals were getting away with, not even in the, you wouldn't even need a super corrupt, town like Gotham. You could get away with this in a regular, normal town. It's just, people were turning a blind eye. It was a willful blindness is the actual term we use nowadays. But, it's so I was eating anytime I find, money laundering stuff and financial crime stuff and Batman's a great one for that because he constantly has this type of stuff. I always go, ooh, that's cool. That's my job. Cool. Woohoo.
When we talk about Wonder Woman series, one of the things we liked is the exploration of the lasso. We understand it more now. The same can be said for Ivy's power in this story, for me. Being lost in the green is somehow comforting. And this does make sense. All of your cares and worries seem to disappear. Your issues, your, things from your childhood, all that stuff can be, you're kind of, you don't worry or care about any of that. You're surrounded by the warmth of the green. It's like a big hug. And I can see why this would be a place that men can fall into. It's like a ShamWow for stress. It just kind of wipes it all away. It was interesting, though, because Bruce's inner dialogue.
Yeah,
I was glad we got to hear from him about what it was like to be in there. It made me feel connected to him, but also made me understand what Ivy actually is doing to them in a way that I didn't before. It's not just her controlling them. There is a comfort to that control that makes you want it even more. And that's the attraction to it.
I got to tell you, every time I'm reading these Ivy scenes, the one song "Poison Ivy" is just going through my head. Yeah, Poison Ivy. Yeah, that's just going through my head every time I'm reading it. And even when she first gives the rose to Bruce, and you can't even see her face. First time I saw, it, I'm like, that's Ivy right there. Right. Cool.
When Selina realizes it's Ivy doing this to Bruce, I was like, oh yeah, it's on.
Girl fight, woohoo!
It was funny. Those were definitely Maroni's men because the killings made him think that Holiday is Falcone. So actually it is later on I started to realize. And it makes sense because I'm sure Maroni knows that Ivy is helping him. The two have to watch each other like a hawk, so I'm sure that Maroni's got somebody on the take in Falcone's organization, and vice versa. Jim versus Harvey on philosophy. Jim Gordon versus Harvey on philosophy. Harvey thinks the mobs killing each other is doing their job for them. Jim, on the other hand, is by the book. They can't cross that line. It's what separates them. And that's what I said. He's Bruce's conscience, and it's because of moments like that. Harvey wants to put an end to this now and thinks Wayne is the key. Jim thinks they need to stick to Maroni. Dent keeps bringing Bruce into it. Do you get the impression that Jim knew in his gut that Bruce was a dead end? Because there are multiple parts during this where I found myself questioning that.
Yeah, I think
Gordon knew all along.
He's too good of a detective not to think that there's something going on here. There's no way that he would have had such a long relationship with Bruce Wayne, constant interaction. Where just now it suddenly appears that this connection, this partnership between the two of them, he would have seen it beforehand. And it's probably maybe trusting a gut instinct when he meets Bruce Wayne. Yeah, Bruce Wayne's the playboy. He's the millionaire playboy.
I talk about that later.
He's not the criminal mastermind. He's not a guy on the take. What would Falcone or Maroni or any of them have to offer Bruce Wayne? Money? He's got plenty of that.
I don't think on the outward surface, Jim Gordon, we talked about this and you mentioned this last episode, we were chatting about it, that does Jim Gordon deep down know who Batman is? I don't know if he could put a name to it himself, but you got to wonder when he's with Bruce Wayne, if there isn't some part of him that feels something, some presence, some connection there. Bruce probably is really good at maintaining the billionaire playboy character in front of almost everybody. But you got to wonder if he's around Jim Gordon for a certain amount of time, if Jim Gordon doesn't pick up on something.
Yeah.
Not even that he can put a name to, but something in him, kind of like when we talk about Selina and Bruce. Maybe they aren't putting a name to it yet, but there is that something, that some connection that they make. I wonder if he doesn't feel that same way when he's with Bruce Wayne.
He's got to. Yeah. And it's like that one, the Killing Joke.
Right.
When Joker's walking down, not Killing Joke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Death in the Family.
Thank you, Death in the Family. When Joker's walking down at the UN, Joker's walking down at the UN and he sees Bruce Wayne sitting there and he knows that it's Batman and he just starts laughing. Mm-hmm. There's that thing where it's just that connection that I think Bane even said
they never reveal there that the Joker knew. They make the indication between the two of them. Do they know? Yeah. Did they connect, or is it? And even I do believe that there is something, a recognition that's unspeakable, and maybe you don't know why you recognize somebody, but you do in a different way. That's what I'm saying. Did the Joker there really put down that Bruce Wayne is Batman? Maybe, maybe not. But he recognized something there that made him chuckle. And I don't know, we could probably talk for hours on whether or not the Joker knew in that moment. And I do agree, that's a great example, though. It's a brilliant example of what I'm talking about here, where you could make the argument, did Jim Gordon always know, or is it something unspeakable that he can't put his finger on? Is it that, let's go back to Lois and Clark. Is it that type of thing where a connection's made, but then you shy it off, or there's all kinds of reasons why it's interesting, and I do think those are good examples of comparisons. Vernon's listening again, which means technically Maroni is, and Carla and Sophie, they have this family resemblance in the art. The Vitti family rules Chicago with designs on Gotham, and you see that at the family map that there is that husband of hers. They want to take over and expand out to Gotham as well. So is Carla to be trusted or not? You don't know, because her loyalty would be, ultimately, you would think, to her husband.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe it's to the family. The husband is a husband, but blood is blood. But also, the whole thing with her son being killed.
Right.
So now, you have the whole question of, is she out for vengeance? Is she out to cover up for herself? Is she the holiday killer? They played some great stuff with making her look like the holiday killer.
And when they'll talk about that, and there's an issue where they specifically look at that. Now, did you take that to mean that the Vitti family would take over from the Roman? And, is that what they meant when they said they wanted to expand there? Or that they wanted to expand there to work with the Roman and somehow be on the take? I took it they meant to take over, right?
Yeah, they're going to take over when the Roman family is completely
uneasy
gone.
Alliance.
Yeah, it's you
Carmine
don't really
knows.
Yeah, you don't have a friendly takeover when it comes to organized crime. There's only hostile takeovers.
Right.
Maybe someone would get a chance to
I didn't
lead
mean
the country.
to take over in a friendly manner. I meant, did you take it that they were trying to take over from the Roman or to work with the Roman as a way to, this is another source of income, that partnership and because families can partner together, but I'm with you. I'm actually with you. And I'm not disputing you there. I'm just saying that's what my question meant. You and I are in agreement.
Yeah, maybe when the Roman was strong and powerful, you'd work with him. But once you see that sign of weakness,
I think they're looking for that and waiting for it.
Yeah. Why do I want 50% of the profits when I can take 100% of the profits? Yeah, that's the mindset.
So they would turn on him
in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I agree. Some of my favorite lines are when Sophie notices the gun that Carla has and asks if the Roman knows. And Carla comes back with, well, I guess he does now, showing that she's totally aware of Sophie's loyalties. Money talks. Falcone's banking status now has money back in her pocket. While I don't doubt that she would turn on her brother, she would stick by him when it makes good business sense. To go against him with Maroney when the dough is flowing, smart woman. I like that. Whereas if the money wasn't flowing now, and Maroney offered an interesting way where she would be making more money, the Vitti family would then be making more money, I think she would side with Maroney.
Yeah.
Things are the way that they should be. And just great dialogue, I think, that just reinforces that. As we look in on Wayne Manor, Bruce reflects on his father's house. Life is good in the Green. Could this also be because it gives him something he can never allow himself, time away from his mission? What do you think, Jim? He'd never consciously go for that. Well, I mean, you take a look at something like Night's End. You read that, didn't you? The end of Nightfall? Yeah. Okay. But this was interesting to me because I don't think this is something he seeks, but it gives him this now. A sort of comfort away from all of that where he can just be a man with a woman at this point.
Yeah, I think he is looking for this, but it's not what he wants.
Right.
It's one of those things where
I think this is more allow himself.
Yeah, this is more of the Green taking over, and not him. You can understand why a guy would just relax and let this happen. Every man is basically pretty much the same. You got this nice, wonderful feeling going on. You want to keep it going. You got a nice looking woman. Granted, she's green, but hey, come on, you take the pluses with the minuses. So
there is a sexiness.
There's definitely
the best artists have always drawn a sexiness to Ivy, so there would be something in her that is attractive.
But this is one of those things where and we later see after he's out of it, just how much it did disturb him.
Oh yes,
how much he doesn't like to not be in control. And I was so glad to see that that once he's free, just that that kind of reaction he has.
Well, she forced him into something that he won't allow himself.
Right.
And you feel dirty after that. Well, it's a deviance.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. And when you're forced into something like that and you don't want to be a part of that, it's a violation on a heavy level. And I did like that feeling of this. It explained her powers I don't think, a lot of times Ivy just looks like, she poisoned you and you're under her control. We don't always see the psychological effect it has on a person. And I really appreciated that in this story.
Yeah, there's this positive nature to being in the Green.
Oh, yeah.
And I like how, especially with the colorists, how they shifted. You have to add the extra green going on, just like you're seeing the world how Bruce sees it. Maybe he sees everything with a green tone. And to answer your question before about with Alfred, my whole thought process throughout all of this was Alfred was also under the control.
And then Bruce frees him after this? It's something we didn't see on camera?
It's something off camera. It's probably one of those things...
Well, she would.
Alfred would see it. Correct. Maybe Alfred would grab something and Ivy would jump in.
Right. I wish that there had been a panel explaining that.
Yeah, or even just...
Tiny little thing.
They could have very easily just had Alfred standing in the corner with the dazed look on his face as well. And draw a little bit of art so you see some leaves around his neck so okay, he's in the Green as well. Very simple.
I agree with the lack of explanation. You can easily fill in the blanks yourself, but it was something where I did notice that it was funny. After all the times I've read this was the only read through. I'm kind of like, wait a minute, what's Alfred doing during all this? And I think that was something that kind of stuck out for me. When Ivy comments on the draft, we know what's coming. Great spread of Catwoman leaping on the table to take on Ivy. I do like the muscle tone of her in this version. She's very athletic, and we should see that definition. She looked more like a gymnast here, like a very highly toned gymnast, and I really liked the drawing of her. It felt very natural to what her character does all night long, what we see her jumping across buildings and rooftops, and she has more of a...
Yeah, she's definitely a world-class gymnast,
and
you
sexy.
Need to see that. Yeah.
Bruce steps in to help, and we see the flirtation Selina has for Bruce in these moments. It's interesting because she's in the Catwoman costume. Now, again, do you think subconsciously they have an attraction? Because I do feel that here. Like, she knows it's Bruce, and there's I don't think, in or out of costume, there's a flirtation between them that's inescapable, that just seems to work. Ivy certainly pulled out all the stops infecting Bruce. Look at the plants growing out of his chest. You even see it under the cuffs of his shirt. There was something very creepy and suffocating about this, which added to the violation, I think, that we talked about. Like, oof. Selena tears it off him. I did like because she's saying, normally I'd really like this, but Maroni's safe house is the next to be taken down by Holiday. And Sophie notices this and realizes that Holiday is not in league with Maroni. And this changes everything, you know. Catwoman calls Batman via the bat signal. Now, do you think she called him just to flirt with him again? Because she never asks for anything. Batman gets to thank her for helping Bruce. This interplay between them is some of the best in Batman, because I really do like in this story the in and out of costume what's going on here. Great writers know how to give us sexy moments between these two whenever they can. It worked. Why did she call him, Jim?
Dude, that was pure flirtation.
Yeah.
You know, that was just...
It's a game.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's, you know, she just had her flirtatious moment with Bruce Wayne. Mm-hmm. So now she wanted her flirtatious moment with her other guy that she's got kind of going on.
She is probably something very difficult for Bruce to accept. He is attracted to her, yet she's a villain. That conflict has to be very hard on who he is morally and what his overall mission is. Yet, he sees that she also has a good side and knows that he would have been destroyed if Catwoman hadn't saved him. So it is an interesting conundrum for him. She is a dance.
Yeah, and I just so loved that inner dialogue that he's got going on, just how, you know, Poison Ivy's no longer in my system. I'm no longer under control, but I owe so much to Catwoman. My bank, my reputation. I was just like, there is so, on so many levels, he's sitting there like, I owe her big time. You know, there would be no Batman, you know, if she hadn't stepped in. There would be no Bruce Wayne if she hadn't stepped in. All of his life was getting taken out by Poison Ivy, and she saved him. And I just, this panel, this moment, and you got the rain coming down, you kind of got that stoic look on Bruce's face as he's thinking all of this. I was just like, oh man, there's so much being told on the Bruce, Selena, the Batman, Catwoman story arc in one simple panel that it was just like, damn, this is cool.
It's a great marriage of, that's what comics do. It's a great marriage of the visual piece, adding to the dialogue, enhancing the dialogue, and telling story that's not told with the dialogue. When this partnership works in the best of comics, it is something that's just a unique experience you can only get in a comic book, and I really like that. This is why this story was really important to me that we did at some point, and I'm glad we're finally getting to it. I was so glad to see consequences in this story due to the influence of a villain. Ivy taking over Bruce matters because it actually did give Falcone more power. It was a cool use of Ivy's M.O. to show that there was more than just a single issue consequence here. This is where a 13 issue arc in this case, actually 15 if you take a look at the double-size issue, really tells a big epic story. Falcone's crossing the line to hire Ivy is interesting. The mob would definitely want to exclude the new freaks from coming into their territory. It's more competition, which means less money. Plus, how trustworthy are they with their obsessions and their quirks and their freakish nature? It is something that they wouldn't be. There is a certain mob code. There's a certain way that you behave in the mob that you notice, like with Falcone and Maroni, there's similarities a lot more so than you notice differences between them in how they behave and react. Whereas if you put Ivy next to Catwoman, you put Catwoman next to Two-Face, you put Two-Face next to the Scarecrow and next to the Mad Hatter and the Joker. These characters all have their own weird quirks that make it so hard for them to combine and work together.
And it's hard to know what you're going to deal with. Mm-hmm. You know, in a sense, we're talking about the mobs double-crossing each other. Sure. But here's the thing. We saw once the money started flowing again, there was no problems.
Right.
It was when the money stopped flowing that they start looking, really saying, okay, let's reorganize here. And reorganization, of course, means death. Mm-hmm. But, you know, if you keep that money going, you keep everything going, business as usual, we're happy. What's, you know, it's, you know, the whole, you know, logic of, you know, war is bad for business. Right. You know, it cuts down on the flow, it cuts down on everything. Yeah.
You know, Falcone's biggest moments of confidence in this story are when all the power is on his end of things. And when I say because he knows then nobody's going to rise to challenge him because the intimidation factor is there. But when a doorway opens where any weakness is shown, it gives another mobster a chance to consider taking over at that moment. Maroni considers making moves specifically when it looks like there's weakness.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a lack of confidence. And when Falcone's coming after him, that in his eyes is a sign of weakness of some sort.
Now, with the freaks, you never know what's going to strike.
No, from moment to moment.
From moment to moment. It's that great scene in Dark Knight with the Joker. With this piles and piles of money, and he burns it, and he's like, I'm a simple man. I don't need this money. Gotham deserves a better class of criminal.
Yeah.
And I just love that line, and just his logic, his illogical logic is just so absolutely wonderful. And it was a great, you see that type of mindset. You see that in this, as you see in that movie, where the mob is following one code, making money. Business, nothing personal, just business.
Right.
Well, the freaks, it's not just business.
They're following.
It is, it's personal. It's fun. It's a quirk. It's a whatever. It's an adrenaline rush. It's whatever they want it to be, not the code.
It's a whatnot.
Yeah, it's a whatnot.
Green Lantern, let you and I destroy that space junk.
Jim, let's go ahead and talk about issue 7, the April Fool's Day issue. The twist in this issue made it one of my favorite in the series.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it when it's time, but just because it swerved me in its kind of originality, I didn't see this coming when it was. I mean, I get a feeling, okay, they're going to do something relating to April Fool's Day, but I figured it would be the way that the person was killed, not what they actually did. So it was cool.
Yeah. I gotta just co-sign on. Just this was probably one of my favorite issues because of that what they did.
Did you see it coming?
No.
No. Okay.
I knew they were going to do something different, but I didn't see it the way they did it.
Yeah. Detective work always makes for great Batman drama, and seeing Riddler, Batman, the Gotham Police Department, and even the mobsters working on different possibilities really kept me wondering who the real killer was. The parallels of Riddler and Bruce exploring the same evidence, showcasing the similarities of the two. We saw this used recently in Batman Confidential's King Tut storyline, and in the Batman titles where the Riddler's been working as a private detective. It just makes sense. Exploring the items left at the scene of the crime that they can almost be purchased anywhere. Looking over the gun used, realizing that it had been mass-produced or custom-made. Both start to narrow down the mystery, and it's funny, while both look a little off the mark, they actually are very close to solving the identity of Holiday. I wonder if the truth of Holiday's identity is why they're both not quite there.
Right.
Because they're looking for one.
And I do so just kick myself. I still, to this day, go, why didn't I see what actually happened?
But that makes us feel like we're on the journey with the good guys, and I do like that. Because both are right about a lot of what they're saying, but it's that twist that makes them a little off. Yeah, Catwoman does make a lot of sense in the Riddler suspect. She's been around Falcone a lot, and having the list from the safe and the gun being just right for a female works. Any good mystery has suspects that are placed on the table, then eliminated. The $1 million bounty being a motive, the best defense being a good offense line, just fantastic. It makes a whole bunch of sense with her. Bruce looks at Maroni. Obviously, the killings have favored him. Even Falcone caught this earlier. Interesting that shooting Alberto in the back is evidence with what we learn about Holiday later. This would throw off the detectives here, and I liked that. Especially because of what we know now about Alberto's death.
Yeah, and I tell you, it was funny because, with Bruce going with Maroni, you always ask yourself on a murder, who's going to benefit from it? And that's always your first thing you go with, and it's...
Identity crisis, who benefits?
Who benefited
that kept coming up all over the place.
You look at those close to them, you look at family, you look at people who could approach somebody and get really up close and personal with them, especially the nature of these murders. So it was just one of those things where I was like, dang.
Question, why does the killer shoot Alberto Falcone in the back? Answer, because he can. How many times do you think Riddler has almost got himself killed pissing someone off when he puts his foot in his mouth?
He kind of reminds me of Maxwell Smart a lot of times.
Yes, very cool. I didn't see that until you just said that, but you're right.
He's got those moments where things fall in place, and there is some intelligence there, but a lot of times he's just a complete bumbling idiot.
Right. But he is going through an important phase here that is, you're saying, intelligence is right here.
There is some deductive reasoning and there's some logic.
Well, there's a ton of that.
Yeah.
There actually is a ton of that, but I think it's his, let's be honest with it, it's his geeky, nerdy quirks that I think get him into trouble. He doesn't have the social graces. That's the way to put it. He really, for as smart as he is, he lacks social graces.
Yeah.
Carla is even put on the table as possibly killing her son. And the fact that, she could easily get close to Alberto. I did like the idea that if Carla killed her son, the motive would be that it allowed her to kill freely and no one would suspect her. It's a great way to cover things up. Would she do that to be able to somehow take power, to have the Vitti family take power in Gotham?
See, here's the thing. With her, I never suspected.
I didn't either, but they have to go through every potential suspect.
And I like that they went through the potential suspects, and there is evidence why, you could think that, but as we're going through this, I never thought it was, of course, Catwoman. We know her too well.
Sure.
Never thought it was Carla, but there's a couple suspects that go through that. I was like, yeah, it could be them. Yeah, it could be that.
But every good police mystery, when they make that board up, they put every single face on there that possibly could be the killer.
Yeah.
They'll put people on one side that, it can't be them. They'll put their highest order suspects, and the only way they get to that list is if they go through everybody. So I really liked how this felt.
Well, Sherlock Holmes, didn't he used to say something like, if you remove the unlikely, it'll leave only the likely, or something like that. It was some logic where you remove all suspects, even the unlikely ones.
Right. And a lot of times exploring the reasons why an unlikely person could have done it will lead you to clues as to why the likely person did do it. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the explanation that they're going through here are dead on, but and it does show there's a glaring consistency over the reasons why people could have killed Alberto, but it does lead to when that clue when they clearly find out
who
it just adds up everything.
I know.
It is interesting. Now, Alfred being a part of the detective work was geek out as I was doing this read through. I'm so Alfred happy in New Gotham. Him examining the gun, pointing out Harvey Dent, that he was part of that whole thinking process. And this issue was great because each scenario was role-played out, and I mean completely role-played out by Bruce and Edward. It makes sense for them to go through the whole thing. And what would it look like, step by step, pace by pace, if they started from the beginning and they were the killer? Harvey, 2 shots to the head, couldn't happen to a nicer guy. I'm for letting them walk, basically setting the Irish up as bait, knowing that they would most likely be killed or hurt. There is something going to go on there to them. Showing up home late. Alfred is being more objective with Harvey than Bruce, who is in denial because this is his friend and someone he's so looking up to as the salvation for Gotham. He respects him that way. Re-explorations of Two-Face are often necessary to remind us why he is so unique. This was Batman's friend, someone he truly respected. His turn is the darkest. It does show the dual nature of the corruption of Gotham and what it can do to people. And that is something that I think is critical about this particular villain in Batman's arsenal.
Yeah, and I tell you, just seeing him point out the fact that Harvey's hair was wet, and I'm thinking, I saw that, yeah. And I literally was just geeking out with, just thinking how smart I was, that yes, it's got to be Two-Face, it's got to be Harvey and all that, and, well.
When we flash to Harvey, he's still obsessed with Bruce Wayne. His obsessive side is something that was always there. Obsessed with Falcone and Maroni. Obsessed with Bruce. Obsessed with his job and how it affects Gotham. This is a huge difference between dedication and obsession. One is healthy and one is a sickness. Look what it's doing to his home life. Look what it's done to his wife. These are things that are critical here to show how this man has much more of a sickness than anything else. The roots of Two-Face were always there. They were hidden behind the appearance of dedication. I do think he was always dedicated. I think he was a good man, and that guy is still in there, but the obsession is why he crossed the line. He has no control over it. Well, except maybe the coin, which takes away the guilt and responsibility in his eyes for things that he does. But that's after he becomes
that's
Two-Face.
The final, crossover. But even though, we'll see the coin later.
Yeah. Eddie Nigma, almost getting his head crushed, shows us that Sophia is more important than just good with a gun. Sophie's dangerously strong. This is pretty scary. Imagine what that feels like, your head in a vice. Because that was clearly...
Yeah, he was getting crushed.
Well, and in the art, the shifting to the color being very pale in the face, the bloodshot eyes, the nose bleeding more and more, the lines increasing. She could have crushed his skull, or at the very least done some permanent damage.
That's a lot of woman there.
Oh, yeah, sure is. Did Carmine think Edward was holding out on him or playing a game with him? Is Edward's eccentric nature what set this in motion? Is Nigma at his worst capable of answering a straight question? Well, yeah, when your head's in a vice, he answers Falcone. And I do think he was throwing out Carmine as a genuine suspect, because he would be on the table as benefiting with what's going on with Maroni now. This is a way of taking the heat off himself as he takes down Maroni.
Yeah, and you think about it, he's gotten the Vitti family back in good graces with him by, getting the money flowing. So now he doesn't have to worry about, them coming in and making the move. So now he goes through, takes out Maroni. The heat is off him because he got hit heavy in the beginning. So this is, he is somebody who can, in the end, benefit from this.
Right. This issue ends with Holiday striking again as Eddie's shoved out the door, leaving Nigma alive but surrounded by bullets on April Fool's Day. I really liked that. I didn't see that being the way it was going, and I really liked that twist.
It was funny because in a way, when I saw the shot, I was half expecting a bang banner, the Joker banner to pop out. And that's what I was thinking we would see for maybe April Fool's Day. But just the bullets surrounding him was really just a cool touch.
Right. We get to issue 8, Mother's Day. And the cover for the next 2 issues, I'm going to talk a lot more about this when we get to issue 9. But this is another favorite cover of mine. Bruce is a little boy, very vulnerable, at his mother's grave. This character, written at his best, has been very real to me. In my childhood, he was almost like a friend. And the best storytelling does this. I think it's why the personal pieces from Bruce Wayne always work with me, because you get to know him and feel like it rounds him off. And you feel that there is a real human with issues underneath there. I think the character development that's gone on in the later years of Batman, in increasing, what drives him, I think has been something that has been only to the benefit of making this character more accessible.
Oh, yeah. It's, we talk about like when Superman stories where we get to see the human side of Clark.
Sure.
It draws us in and we enjoy it more. You see, like when Clark had his powers away, up, 1 year later, up and away, that whole story arc. Like, that was really cool. You see the human side of him. Well, it's the mother stuff. It's the father stuff. And it's how he looks at the mother and father differently. He loves and respects both of them, but each one does have that different role. That father is the, that man he looked up to, that man he respected, the man who he wanted to be like. Whereas the mother is the loving, the nurturing, the supportive, just that, the mom, it's that all those wonderful feelings. You think about back to childhood, especially when you're a little kid, those are some of the, I know for me and I know probably for you as well, those are some of those great years of, time with your mom, and you could curl up and you just feel warm and protected and safe when you're with your mom, and it just, everything is good. You get a boo-boo on your knee, she makes it feel better. You're kind of hungry, she gives you a little bit of something to eat, maybe some milk and cookies to make you feel better. It's that connection that, that the men have, that we have with our moms, and it's that, some people will sit there and say, in your relationships, they always say that women look for, guys that remind them of their fathers. Do men look for women that remind them of their mothers? It's that, it's that kind of connection.
Right.
So there is there's just that basic connection that we all have with our moms. And when we see these moments with Bruce, we see this massively powerful, creature of the night, this, vengeance, justice, this, venging angel of justice that we see in Batman. But there is still that same connection that he's like us. He still has that connection to his mom. He still misses his mom. And it's, just a powerful connection that brings the reader into, Bruce's life. We'll never know what it's like to be a millionaire, super millionaire playboy jet setting around the world, or be, Batman swinging from the rooftops, beating up on the thugs. But we will know what it's like to be a son with the mother, have that, that feelings and that loss and that love and that devotion. We'll see and feel that. And so because we see that, because we have that same connection, we are part of Batman. And so, when we're reading this stuff.
It goes back to the old thing. A lot of times the debate comes up. Why do we need another origin of a character? Why do we need to reboot? I'm really excited for Superman's Secret Origin when it comes out. I want to see what Jeff Johns does with the origin again. I loved Birthright, which is the last version of it that was out. Did you ever read Birthright?
No, I haven't yet.
I recommend that one. It's a great read. Very similar to how I liked Man of Steel when Byrne did it. Birthright is another great example of a really great different take on the Superman origin. I'm going to be curious to see Jeff Johns'. Why do we need to periodically do this? Sometimes the characters need to be updated, reimagined. Sometimes you'll pull things from the classic of the character to kind of make them today and re-explain them, because a lot of times you got to explain, why is this character still around? Why are these concepts still relevant today? Tie it and make it, modernize it a little bit more so it fits to more of a today mentality. So that way you can explain why these characters are still relevant today. Because their original core concepts were so cool and so interesting that they still work. Great example of this would be, I explained that I subscribed to that Marvel Digital Comics because I wanted to follow our buddy Alan over there. And one of the titles that I've been collecting in trade that I started reading some more issues of recently is Ultimate Spider-Man. Now, I'm not current with Ultimate Spider-Man, and it's not because I dislike it or anything. It's just time. I haven't had a chance to get to that book because of all the stuff that we do for the show. But it's another one of those Marvel titles that I think, especially when it kicked off, there was something special and unique about it because it basically took Spider-Man and rebooted him and made it very today and very modern. So that's a great example of a book that, for people, if you're a Spider-Man fan, I would definitely read Ultimate Spider-Man, because it is an interesting example of how you reimagine a character. I'm not saying that DC, because I've seen websites before, or reviews and before, where they're saying, why doesn't DC do something like this? I don't know that you necessarily always have to do it that way. I think Marvel's way of approaching the Ultimate line was very cool, and I've enjoyed the Ultimate line. But I think there's different, like All-Star Superman was a great example of a reimagining of what the Superman concept is. I think would good writers have reasons to reimagine, remodernize, pull in things from the classic, because All-Star Superman is a great example of pulling everything in from the Silver Age to present day and just monkeying around with it to make a really true to the core Superman story. Reimagining these characters and getting to their core works every so often because it helps us understand them and why the concepts are cool. I think it's why, though, and my point here is, it's why we don't see a new Spider-Man. It's why we don't see a new Batman. It's why we don't see a new Superman for a long stretch, other than maybe a year here or there or something like that, because it's the character behind the cowl or, in the costume who, at their core, there was something that was originally created about them that to do anything other than talk about that particular person is, you're missing elements of the concept. And I think that's what's like, and that's totally saying that I'm loving Dick Grayson right now in that role, but there is something about Bruce that's brought to the table when Bruce specifically is under that cowl.
And I'm the guy who says he wants to see Bruce grow old and wants to see
and I'm with you. I want to see that storytelling too.
Even as I say that, as you're saying that, I'm agreeing with you that I want to see Bruce Wayne in the cowl. 30, 40 years from now, I still want to pick up a comic, or download a comic or whatever the media is back in that time period and read Bruce Wayne in the cowl. There is that commonality, that familiarity that I want to get. Now, I'm going against exactly what I said 5 seconds ago, but it's that duality, that nature of the comic. We want the continuation. We want, what we're comfortable with, what we're familiar with. Now, even if we want something different, even if we want something new, we still want to be able to go back to what was our Batman, what was our Superman, who was our Flash or our Green Lantern.
Right.
We still want these characters to be how they've always been, and either whether it's our childhood, our adulthood, or whatnot.
Yet I loved Batman Beyond with Terry McGinnis.
Yeah, God, yeah.
And Bruce was in there, and you got to see an older Bruce. So I'm with you. I'm not against that. I think it's why I said I would like that done in a separate title, Because I would love to follow more stories with that progression. I think you could make a good anthology book or a good ongoing series where you just kind of every arc focused on different characters that you spotlighted to show how the characters advance over time. I would love to see that. So a lot of times when we do this, I am on the opposing side because I'm a fan of when characters are revamped for just that purpose, to modernize them, because you get that core character. But I'm also I would be very intrigued to see Batman get married. I think I'm of two minds of it because of Earth 2 and how much I loved that concept where we got to see Bruce married to Selina Kyle. You got to see Clark married to Lois long before it was ever done, in what would be today's continuity. I'm a fan of those things. Julian Day is quite the personality. Really bizarre, which makes him the perfect Arkham inmate. The hard part with Gotham's battery of villains is that there are moments you can argue they are completely aware of what they're doing. There's rhyme and reason, there's a logic, and they should be locked up in a regular prison or given the death penalty. The main issue is that they all have some quirk. Some more than others, some go farther than others. Some issue that easily brands them insane. Days is his obsession with the calendar. Because really when you see him, he's very lucid at times. Yet there is that twist where he will say things and you're like, this guy's completely off his rocker. Totally dead on, completely off his rocker.
I know. And I tell you, he is one of the big ones that I was really kicking myself with the way he talks about who Holiday is. And where he jumps back and forth.
He's making quite a name for herself.
Yeah. And stuff like that, I was just like, I honestly, I read it, I saw it, but as quickly as the thought entered my head as to who he was talking about, it disappeared as well.
Right.
It never lingered long. It was, I was like, and it should have stayed in, and I should have known, and it's probably the biggest thing where I'm just like kicking myself over it.
And the concept of Arkham makes sense. If you free them from what seems to be causing the madness, they can be rehabilitated, and that does make sense. Bruce is right here. The Calendar Man does seem to know. I would assume that Holiday has become an obsession for Day, who continues to look at this as an insult. He's worked day and night to figure it out, and really hasn't had to stop thinking about this in the way that everyone else involved has. They've had distractions. Do you think that Day realized when the switch occurred?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I'm thinking he's just so connected to this right now that he's in the zone. He's the
all
guy.
He thinks about.
Yeah, this is it.
It's interesting that Day references that Harvey is a Gemini, perhaps early on realizing that Harvey has a dual nature. Bruce is still on the wrong track with him, but in some ways that does bring him closer than you would even think because of what we do know about Holiday. So these kind of connections are interesting. Jonathan Crane escapes, which stops Batman from his further interviews with the Calendar Man. I'm kind of convinced here the mystery could have been solved if Batman was able to pursue it more with Day.
It kind of reminded me of the Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
Scenes with Jodie
Very
Foster
good.
just meeting with, Hannibal Lecter and just that going tit for tat, just going on over the clues. What are the clues? And even in the prequel to that Red Dragon, where that guy, the investigator met with Hannibal for the exact same reasons to try to get the groove going, to get that sense and that, the feeling of the hunt on, if you will. So, I loved seeing Batman just go and just talk to them. We've seen him come to Arkham before. We've seen him interrogate the inmates before, and just he's got that same type of. He's not 100% sane. Now, granted, Bruce isn't completely insane, but he's not 100% normal. Right. There is a little bit something to a guy who does what he does.
Oh, sure.
It's just he hasn't crossed that line. Mm-hmm. He doesn't let himself cross that line because of his discipline, because of his his dedication to the mission.
And the police watch him to make sure he doesn't.
Right.
Because if he crosses that line, then
it's to me, and I know what you mean, but it's really not the police watching him that stops him. The underlining
No. And I'm not. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that on any level at all. And I shouldn't say it's not every police officer that watches him. I would say that we've seen in storytelling police officers that wait for, like Harvey Bullock, his relationship with Batman, more so before than now when Harvey was originally introduced in the comics. Bullock was very anti-Batman, and Harvey was waiting for Batman to cross the line and to slip up.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. I'm not saying let me rephrase that and reword it. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it keeps Bruce in line, because Bruce, honestly, we've seen storylines told. We've seen storylines where there was a different commissioner and the police were after Batman, where he continued going on with his mission regardless. So that is not a deterrent for him, and I don't mean that. But I do mean that there have been lots of storytelling elements where we've seen police watching him to make sure he stays on that straight, that that thin line that he walks never snaps.
Yeah.
And because they are ready to pounce on him if necessary. And certain officers, like Harvey Bullock is a great example, not now so much as in the past, of somebody who is ready to pounce on him. Because I do think Harvey's come to an understanding in his mind with who Batman is.
The town needs Batman, and I think he understands the code that Batman lives under.
I think so now, too.
He feels it.
Yeah, I think there's been an evolution there. Now, I'm even taking that Batman could have understood this and solved this, even if Day doesn't completely know what's going on. Because he seems to know enough with his comments that it would have solved many of the problems the various detectives working on this case seem to be having to solve it. The switch.
Yeah,
Day seems to be very clear that he knows there was a switch. Once that happened, it makes sense why their trails don't necessarily add up. And the clues led in one direction, but then the situation changed, which means they don't really apply to anybody that they're looking at completely.
Right.
What kind of person strangles their mother on Mother's Day? I mean, okay, sure. You have parent issues. I've even seen stories where I can see why people would be driven that way. I'm not condoning it, as, I think anybody who would murder anybody is always wrong. But we've seen documentaries where you can understand a life leading to that. Parents being abusive and things like that. But to pick Mother's Day or a birthday, for example, you have to be nothing but evil to the core to pick that day.
Yeah.
There is no two ways.
I was going to try to come up with a witty little comment about, Mother's Day I'm not even going to go there just because of, it's Mother's Day. Come on,
I mean.
man.
It's like, how can you do that?
Come on, that's just wrong on so many levels.
Yeah.
That's kid touching wrong.
Yeah.
There's no way you can defend it. There's no way you can make a little witty joke about it that wouldn't be inappropriate. There's
certain things that you have to say to yourself. You just morally don't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've even seen twisted people where I'm like, okay, I can understand why this person would be driven to kill their parents. Not saying they're right, not justifying it. They're completely nuts. But you can understand what elements of their life led them to that. But you would think even then they might make a nice dinner for their parents on Mother's Day or their birthday or Father's Day or whatever. And then we're done issue.
Yeah. See, I could see a psychopath making this beautiful dinner for their mom.
Yeah.
And then the next day killing them.
Yes.
I could see that. Just giving them the
saying
perfect
I couldn't
day.
do it on Mother's Day.
Giving them this perfect day and then kill them.
Right.
So that way they leave after having this perfect day. You give them this great sending off present, if you will, of the perfect Mother's Day. You get breakfast in bed in the morning. Here you go, Ma, happy Mother's Day. A nice little card, maybe even go old school, do the handmade card and all that. And no, I haven't thought about doing this as I'm rattling.
Yeah, I was like, you really got this going good. I was like,
I'm thinking, I better clarify this.
And, dude, I love your mom. I mean, it's like, what are you doing? She's great. The analysis of the escape was terrific. Again, using the clues to find out that Crane was aided in his escape. That was awesome. The 2-page of him on the horse, really sharp and dynamic. Jonathan Crane, psychologist and psychopath. He preys on the innocent and instills them with fear. Not in my city and not on this day. Mother's Day having a very personal meaning for Bruce is something I really enjoyed. The recent Batman films weren't able to explore his mother as much as I would have liked to have seen. I'd love to see the third film if there's an opportunity to do that to some extent. I think it's important to his story to understand how much both of his parents mean to him, what kind of respect he had for them, to understand why he's driven so much. You talked before about how he skirts that line. He does, because his parents are what his obsession was. And you do see so much with Dad, and in the next issue we'll talk a lot more about it. You see so much in this with Dad. Why? And I liked how we got to see in this issue Mom, that there was something about Mom as well. I'd like to see more of that exploration. The ruse when Bruce catches him on the horse, particularly slick. I did not expect on my first read-through to see this. The Scarecrow, familiar foe, and the villain helping him also knows Batman. They would set up something to buy time. It was also a way to release the toxins on the Bat, which has become a great tool that further hurts Bruce's reputation out of the cowl in this story, and I'm glad to see that he isn't instantly well outside of the cowl. That stuff works for me as well. Ivy affected him there. Now we'll see that Scarecrow did as well. Interesting dynamics in this story that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's these swerves like this that with the villains who know him so well, yes, he knows these people. He knows how they think. He knows, how to bring them down. But they also know him, and that was a beautiful just setup. As you said, it was a 1-2 nice ambush, and it has that extra damage of you're really hurting Bruce Wayne that they probably didn't even think would happen.
Well, no, they wouldn't know.
No,
because they don't know he's Bruce Wayne.
Or even just, they wouldn't be thinking of hurting Batman outside the cowl.
Right.
Is what I'm saying.
Because they don't know that the person outside the cowl on any level
is anything significant.
Would be a positive for them. Gordon and Alfred remain in character, and this is critical to me on favorite Batman stories. Jim is nothing but professional again. He needs to do this by the book, and I have no doubt he will keep coming until he actually gets to speak to Bruce. I also believe that he genuinely wants to believe Bruce is innocent. But like any good policeman, he has to be impartial and handle things correctly. He believes in this system. I did notice that Alfred respects him as well. I don't think it's just him maintaining the butler role. He genuinely tries to reason with Gordon. And the truth is, the story that this day is important to Bruce is something that Alfred's using, and it's right because it's actually genuine. We see this even when he's in the cowl and talking about Crane, that this day is special to him. Sophie is true to her word. She did let go when he gave up the info. And I keep forgetting here that Alberto's her brother. Holiday also killed her cousin. So, sure, she's doing this for Carmine, but there's a personal connection as well. I don't know what it is with her. I think the way that she was introduced, I keep thinking of her as just a common thug.
Yeah.
She's not, though. She is the daughter of Carmine, so this is her family that there was an issue with. So there's a personal connection here as well as I do believe she is acting for Carmine on that behalf. But
yeah. It's it's one of the classic things in any action movie
yeah.
where let me go, I let you go.
And I saw it coming, but it was great.
You still chuckle. It's why it's a classic. It still makes you laugh.
You understand why she would do it too. Again, it goes back to in their world, intimidation needs to be there, and they keep it there, and that's how they keep their power. Chong's Tea House. Okay, and actually, in taking that one step further. Sometimes letting someone live is a sign of weakness because you show compassion. They can't do that. Their world has very strict rules to follow. Chong's Tea House, like I was saying. Okay, we know about the holiday switch. Did both use the same supplier, or is this the supplier for the current one? It has to be for the current one, obviously, so there's an interesting twist here.
I don't know. I was sitting there and I was honestly trying to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who used,
Well, it had to be the current one, because otherwise this guy wouldn't be dead.
True. Okay, there you go, yeah.
I would think, Unless the other one was doing it to protect... But that still wouldn't make sense, because the other one kept going. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the Mother's Day death. The upcoming DC MMO has to have Crime Alley, right?
It's got to.
Yeah, because I want to see these landmarks. I mean, I was looking at that bit when they did the Crime Alley bit. I'm like, oh, all right, love to see a Wildstorm Jim Lee rendition of Crime Alley and see that in there, because that's obviously it's going to be Wildstorm art that's going to be in there. I'd like to see that. Pearls are for a special day. Couldn't we make it special, Mother? Bruce's own feelings of guilt over their deaths, that he is somehow responsible. That is a psychological issue that he hasn't been able to get past. It's important to understand what drives his obsessions. He skirted a fine line mentally. The fear toxin working here also brings this to the surface, which I really liked that.
I tell you, it's a little subtle thing. Like they did, it was one of those things with Batman Begins when they showed how Bruce felt personally responsible. If he hadn't, been afraid of the bats in that in the opera, they wouldn't have left the movie. They wouldn't have left the show that soon, getting the family killed. Here, they were going after the pearls. They wanted her to steal her pearls. The reason she wore the pearls was because Bruce said, "Hey, come on, Mom, wear them."
And it's clear that over his years, he's analyzed every little detail of what led up to that night, every little detail of that night, and with a fine-tuned comb to a level that really he's blaming himself for things that were circumstantial, that there's an argument that could be made that no matter, she could be wearing rags, and this guy probably would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's the curse of him being such a detective. He overthinks this whole event. This wasn't about the pearls. This wasn't about things. No. It was just about some street thug who panicked in a robbery and killed them. It's honestly a miracle that Bruce is even still alive.
Sure.
The guy should have, in all honesty, should have put a bullet in Bruce as well. And that's should have been the end of it all. But for some reason, the guy took off and ran and left Bruce lying there, with his, his mother and father. But he will never look at it that simple. He can't look at it as that simple as there was a nasty guy out there who was some thug. Maybe he was desperate. Maybe he was hungry. Nowadays, it would have probably been a junkie. If they retold the story nowadays, he'd be a junkie. But it's not some glorified master crime, some master plan that caused it. But Bruce will never see that. And that's, when Bruce finally sees that, that's the day he hangs up the cape and cowl.
Right. Now, due to the toxin, he mistakes the police for the killer of his family. And the damage is done. The second he takes off running, he now looks like he has something to hide. Wow, was this a great sequence. During these moments, you can actually, they're actually chasing a scared child, reliving the death of his parents. And that's really the mode he's in at this point. He's trying to help his mother escape in his mind, trying to change history. They try to reason with him, but have no idea that his elevator is not currently reaching the top floor. Now, even during all this, Gordon, I think, is making an exception here. And definitely tell me what you think. It's obvious this man is crazed. Under most circumstances, he would consider this person a danger to himself and to others. Yet Gordon holds the officers at bay. I don't think he truly believes Bruce did this. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Do you think he trusts him on some instinctive level that he can't understand? I'm not sure on the surface he knows, but subconsciously does he know this is Batman? You know what I mean? He can't... if you asked him, Jim, why did you stop them there? Do you think he would be able to give a complete answer that made sense? Or is there just something in his gut? What do you think's going on here?
I think we got a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Okay.
There's definitely is some gut playing into it, and maybe the gut is telling him it's Batman. But it's also, you got to look at Bruce Wayne.
Just to clarify, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off on that, but just to clarify there, I'm not saying that if you asked him point blank, he would say, I think that man's Batman. I don't think that on any level. But I think there is something about Bruce that he trusts. And I do think specifically, if you asked him, I don't know what it is, I trust Bruce Wayne. There's something about it. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
The line probably would be, like, come on, it's Bruce Wayne. We've never had any type of history of violence from him. We've never had any reason to suspect him as being anything but above law, being, just this $1 million playboy, He ran for a reason. Maybe he was scared. Maybe there was something else going on. I don't know. But there was no outward sign that his officers, that he was in danger, or anybody else would have been in danger. Right. Had Bruce been running around with a gun, that would have been another story.
Sure.
But, it's Bruce just running.
Well, and touching on your point, too, and there is a certain point to this. In a city that is so corrupt, when you have a family like the Waynes who have been so well respected, more so his father and his mother than him, to be able to... And I mean, he stayed, aside from being this, like, aloof playboy, he stayed pretty straight and narrow. You would think that this family... Gordon would clutch onto something, some hope that, okay, some of the people that are truly good in Gotham or truly have been good in Gotham, you would hope they would still be that way, and this poor kid was tormented growing up, can we give him a little bit of a break here and assume that he's okay first before we talk to him?
Yeah, I think that had more of a play to it, and maybe the thing guiding his thing was this gut feeling he has about him, but...
Well, him running is why he got into prison.
Yeah. Hey, I tell you, one of the biggest indicators of guilt is running.
Sure,
there's a lot of, smart aleck cops who will say, if you run, if we have to chase you, we're bringing a beat down with us. There's a lot of, going on with that, but it's also why would somebody run from us? Only reason why they're running is if they're guilty of something. Maybe not what we're arresting them for, but there's something out there. So we got to take our chances. And
I liked Gordon's handling of this because it really showed him as a good police officer. And I think it's good to see stories that show the police, because a lot of times police in stories, most of your stories feature police that are corrupt and things like that. And I like seeing stories that paint a positive picture. There are a lot of good police officers out there. Yeah. And it is good to see stories that do show us that side of it as well, because they deserve that.
There's more good officers than bad officers.
Agreed.
I've dealt with a lot of the different departments in the greater Cleveland area as well as south of here, and I've gotten a chance to meet with some really cool guys. Some people who are just I've gotten to meet guys like Jim Gordon. Guys who've been on the jobs long enough that they have the instincts on people, that they can make those quick gut reactions, those quick gut checks, and that just, not jump over the board. And I've met the young guys who are just, it's the dog chasing after the car. Going, just, completely hardcore. Hard pressed, and those are the guys you got to keep a little bit reeled back. You got to keep them in check. You put the rookies with the veterans and whatnot. That type of mindset. Gordon he's the veteran. He is a cop. He is a good cop who is going to look at every scenario. He doesn't want blood on his hands if he doesn't need to. And right now, there's been no indications that he needs the fire. That he needs to they need to put him down. So until he gets that sign. Gordon's going to take it easy. He's going to take it cool, but he's also going to protect his people and protect the community.
Right.
When he was holding people back, it was more of a, hey, let's get in position. Let's not run up to him. Let's not go all half-cocked. Hold your fire unless I say so. And it was, a lot of just, he wasn't saying people, put away your guns and calm down. This isn't a threat. No. But he was saying, hey, keep it in check. We got to make sure, we do this by the book. It's the law, not, vigilantism. It's justice, not revenge. It's, these code that Gordon lives by. This is who he is. And it's one of the cool things that you love about Gordon stories. I love about Gordon stories. Yeah. And we both want to see more stuff with Jim Gordon.
And I think my appreciation of police officers have come because of my own career as a teacher. I think, my opinion is that there's more good-hearted, good teachers to the core that would never do something stupid with a student than the ridiculous ones that we've seen. Even the last year, it makes me so angry when you see someone who's stupid enough to cross that line with a student on any level. And, we've seen so much of that in recent years. And when I say so much, a handful. You can count them on one hand, or maybe two. You look over the past couple of years. But when you take a look at how many teachers there are across the entire country, even it's such a small, minute number. But it's like corrupt officers. Sure, are there true stories about that? Absolutely, sure. But again, small amount. Compared to the sheer ton of them. And I guess being in my own profession and just how it makes us look bad when people are stupid enough to do dumb things like that. I can imagine police officers, good police officers who, really take their job seriously, get very angry when they see somebody who crosses the line and goes outside of the code. It makes you wonder, why did you become a police officer? What are you even doing this for if you would violate this? Do you have any respect for the people you work with? If you would, because it really is, whenever you make those decisions to cross those lines, it's not even a violation of you only. It's a violation of everybody you work with, and everybody who, in their case, wears the badge. In my case, it's the people who walk through the door into their classrooms. So I guess it's funny how I've connected with police officers because of my career when I see a corrupt officer do that, because I'm like, darn it, it's another one. People should be able to trust and have confidence in the police, and you would think a majority of the police officers get angry when that happens because of what it does for their job. It's interesting. Batman clutching the headstone at the end, so beautifully illustrated a shot. Kudos to the whole art team for that, because I felt the emotion. It shows you how much of your own reality the Scarecrow's fear toxin brings to the surface. Because, for Bruce, it just totally at that moment, everything is let go. All the control that he has, everything he's crafted himself to do to get past this is completely gone in those moments. And I really appreciated how this story handled that. It's very good. Jim, let's go jump into issue 9, Father's Day. And I really liked the cover distinction here from issue 8's. Bruce is in the Batman outfit on this one. He does look more like an adult son showing respect to his father. I thought the art distinction matched the father-son relationship the way issue 8's matched the mother-son relationship. A little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more emotion there. And I really liked those back-to-back covers. It was something that I appreciated, the amount of care that Tim Sale and crew put into those two covers, because I did think that they captured the mood and tone of Bruce's mom and Bruce's dad.
Yeah, and that was the cool thing about all of these covers, where they're really, kind of giving you a little glimpse into what's going to happen in the issue. Mm-hmm. They're not laying out, showing specific scenes from the action that's going on, but they're giving you the subtle hints. Like when we had that Valentine's Day where it was the bat and the cat mixed, but had the ivy in the surrounding, in the heart. It was just those little things like that, just telling you what's going to happen, but not, being overboard and ruining or being a spoiler cover.
It also shows that, from what we've learned from our artist friends who've done the show, a lot of times they don't know the entire contents of the issue. They might get a blurb, like this issue is going to be about this, or we're going to be exploring this in this issue. So they don't necessarily have enough to be able to put always specific details from the story onto the cover. They try to put as much as they can a lot of times and thematically tied in as much as possible depending on the information that they have. So it is interesting that sometimes the artists themselves are limited because they don't have that script in front of them. It may not be ready yet because they have to have the covers in advance. And it's an interesting distinction. So I don't know in this case how that worked, but I did think that was, I think it's an interesting reason. This issue is really important because now we learn the secrets of the Thomas Wayne and Falcone relationship. And I'm glad they built this over 9 issues. It's great drama. Why reveal it right away when we can all question it alongside those hunting Bruce? And Maroni's dad, Luigi, shot Carmine. Carmine's father came to Wayne to save him, mainly because he couldn't go to the hospital. Look at what they've done to my boy. Once again, very Godfather. And I loved that. I did. I really liked that aspect to it. Bruce's awe of his dad and how it was like magic. Once again, great development of why. Batman's story is all the more powerful and believable when we know why. The readers really want to connect with him, to feel like we know him. I think this is true of any good story. It's where escapist fantasy takes us away from the little stresses of life a bit. This is one of those tales where my childhood hero is really accessible because I understand why he even cares about his parents' death as much as he does. I'm not saying every child, if you lose your parents, it's going to hurt you. But the strong views that he has of his parents at this age, Dad's magic. Dad's is a hero.
Yeah.
Dad is he's not just a dad. I mean, every dad, you look up to your dad to a certain extent. His dad, for him, one more step up the rung. He's a hero.
He saves lives. He
Yes.
takes people from death and brings them back to life. That's superhero stuff going
Right.
on there. And you can see just that, he's talking with that respect, but it's respect, love, admiration. He, as a kid, if the dad had never died, if there had never been a crime alley, Bruce right now would be a doctor.
Sure.
There's no doubt whatsoever in my mind. And to be honest, maybe even like a children's doctor. A little bit from the mom, the little bit of love and compassion from the mom, maybe that would drift over.
Or he'd be doing something helping the community.
There'd
something
be
helping lives.
Oh, yeah.
So even if he's not a doctor, I believe that his path would have been on one where uncompromisingly he would be helping others.
Yeah, big time.
Thomas Wayne staying away from money and power makes sense. He has his own money. And he does this because that's the way he's wired. He truly believes in the Hippocratic Oath. He tries to save others. That is the man that is laid out for us when Batman Begins is going on, and I truly like him. We don't see him often in comics, but the times that I have really made me like the character. I get Bruce. When Morrison's been playing us with Dr. Hurt, he's been playing an interesting game. Stories like this have really laid out for us that this is a man of unwavering class and a set of morals. Stories like this make R.I.P. more powerful, for example. If you don't know Thomas Wayne, you don't care when a villain like Dr. Hurt plays with your head. We did, though, because we know Thomas Wayne from stories like this, and that's where it matters. It's not so much a violation or a deviation for Bruce unless we understand his father the way that he does. Because Dad saved Falcone, it puts a history between Wayne and Falcone that the police can't ignore. And I love this. It makes sense. The police would be wrong not to pursue it. They just wanted to question him, but now with the bank issue due to Ivy and the Scarecrow, Bruce's own actions have made him a suspect. The villains have hurt him in a way that they didn't expect. Ivy's more so, but wow.
Yeah, they didn't see this coming, and it's funny because if you look at the evidence they have against Bruce, they really didn't have a strong enough case, and
and that worked out that way.
And it worked out that way, but it's you look at this. This isn't the grand jury will indict basically. It was the one line from Manhunter that one time. The grand jury will indict a ham sandwich, and they will if you give them just a taste of. It's not up to the grand jury to decide guilt or innocence. It's up to them to decide if charges should be filed, if there should be a trial, if this should go through the process. They're like the initial kind of feeler, and usually cases fly through the grand jury.
Right.
They had nothing on him other than his father had somewhat connection. He had some business deals, which we know as soon as he regained control of himself, he canceled those deals. So there was a period where the bank was doing business with Falcone. Probably not anymore. As soon as Bruce got his thought back, he probably turned that around and said, "No, this is over."
Alfred is so brilliant during the courtroom scenes. He didn't just sit at home wondering what to do. He made a defense. Being honest, Alfred's case is correct. Carmine and Bruce don't have a relationship. Sure, they talked at a party, but Bruce denied Falcone. How do we know that Thomas didn't file a police report? The corruption in Gotham? Well known. His own murder has not been brought to justice in this storyline. Wow. What would a jury... what jury wouldn't side with the facts in this case? There's nothing here.
Yeah, it's absolutely nothing. I loved how Gordon even was able to recognize just that's going to hurt us right there. Right. Talking about the corruption, like, well, how do you know he didn't file it? Do you actually know for certain that 30 years ago, 30 years ago there wasn't this filing that just got shuffled away and disappeared because of the corruption in the courtroom? I love that, and
which we know, and he points out which we know is history. So he's pointing out specific facts that are proven.
Yeah.
Alfred points out that also that these were decent people, and the reputation of respect is universally known. This is also written to take place in an era where people aren't as into the fall of great people as they are today. Which is its distinction. It's a sad state of today's society. Rather than look for goodness, we are geared through much of our media to focus on the flaws because those bring in ratings. That is really kind of today. We do look for, our celebrities, our top stars and things like that, the people that are in the limelight. It's more interesting television if they're, getting drunk, crossing a line, whatever.
And even if there's
we look for their worst.
Yeah, even if there's good going on. You can't just say, "Hey, this was great." You got to say, "Hey, this is great." Bam, slap in the face.
Right.
You got to put that little negative spin on it. You got to put that little, there's got to be a little bit of dirt with everything that's out there. And if not, it's boring. Like, no, it's not boring if you just like it. If it's good, you can report the good, but I don't know. You can't nowadays. You can't. And this is all media. We say TV, print, internet.
And I said media.
Everything.
I really did not mean just TV. It's
I know.
And honestly, it's due to the viewership as well, though, because the ratings do go higher. It shows that people are. It is a sad state of affairs that this is where we're at as a society, that we're more interested in that.
And here's the other sad thing. It's not just media. It's personal inner dynamics.
Sure.
And you think about it at work, we'll talk about, some celebrity dying. When Michael Jackson died, we talked about that. When Farrah Fawcett died, we talked about that. We didn't talk about any of the. We didn't seek out like good news or hey,
somebody
did you hear,
donating to charity.
Somebody here, so and so did this or
right.
You always look for the darker side of it. Madonna wants to adopt a baby in a third world country. Oh, there's got to be something corrupt or twisted going on with that. No, maybe she just wants to help some kid out. Maybe she wants to give some kid this wonderful fairy tale lifestyle.
Who's in the lowest of the low.
Yeah. But we have to look for the darker, the seedier side of that. And I will fully admit, I'm guilty of doing that as well.
I'm not pointing the finger at anybody.
Yeah, it's...
I meant, as I said, it's a sorry state of us as a society. I really wasn't excluding myself from it. It is interesting. I think it's important that we recognize that, though, if we're going to make any changes to it. And when was the last time you saw a news story on the internet? I looked on there with Michael Jackson. There was multiple stories about his death and all that stuff. When was the last time, though, you saw multiple stories about, this celebrity donating millions of dollars where you couldn't miss a link of it when you went from website to website? When was that all over the place? Because there are, in fairness, there are a lot of celebrities who do really nice work and really good things in all mediums. Whether they're actors, they're writers, they're artists, they're whatever, who are doing just amazing things that aren't being noted as much. Acts of charity, acts of goodwill, things like that. Sure, they're noted and they're brought up in the media, but you don't see them published all over the place. And I don't know what the answer is, but I would love to see a shift from that. But it was interesting because, and the point of this is, when you take a look at this particular era, it fits here because it was a happier time. When you look at the movies that are set in this era, because you got to take this as the classic mob era, where you take a look at the movies of this time, they were more upbeat. There was a lot more of the happy note to it, and the music, there was a lot more of that as well. It kind of fits the time. So, Luigi's death sequence. Can anyone say Brando from The Godfather? Sal is such a tool, though, that he's clearly not Michael. Because he is really... How do I fix this mess, Lou? You can act like a man!
Yeah.
I would hate to live in that world. You'd never trust an ally because even those closest to you would be ready to stick the knife in your back to take you out. Maroni has to get to Falcone first. And when Luigi is killed by Holiday, it makes sense where this puts Sal's thinking. It's interesting that with the killer switch, it's silly that I keep dancing around this, but I kind of don't want to really jump and throw it in everybody's face because we're going to talk about when we get to those issues where there's the reveal. But the body types, and I think that's something I do want to note here. It's not like the killer switched from someone thin to Sophie, for example, because I think we're pretty clear that Sophie's not on the table because she was in prison.
Right.
But I think it's why we as readers aren't alerted until the end, because of the body types of Holiday in this situation. They aren't drastically off. So it works when we see Holiday as well. The art keeps the mystery believable when you read and reread. I noticed this during the dog chase, and then I started looking back and I'm like, ooh, okay, I kind of get it here. Bruce is acquitted. Sophie and Carmine both hunting Holiday. If Bruce was convicted, how much do you want to bet that Carmine would have had him killed or tortured, not necessarily in that order, in prison or on the way? Because of his son, right?
Yeah.
And again, not just for revenge, but the need to show he has the power to do that, to keep the rest in line. So it would have been twofold reason. I do think revenge a factor, but also look what happens to you if you mess with me and my own. Which I think is an important distinction. It's so funny because we never get to the true reason, I said, of Catwoman's thing. As we see her looking on and watching all this, we never get to the true reason of her motivations here. I do like that was a mystery that was left dangling here. Because when it is revealed, it's worth it. So I will say again, if you're reading this for the first time because you joined us with it for the show, and it is one, I want to make a note here. One of the reasons why we had to delay this was we had so much going on that we wanted to do this well. And anytime we put something out there and say, we're going to do this on the show, we're asking you to purchase it, if you want to read it and follow along with us, I want to make sure that at the end you're saying, wow, whether you like the story or not, you feel like we gave you something worth following.
Yeah.
So I hope for those of you that purchased this you're enjoying these episodes that we're putting together for Long Halloween, because my feeling is if I'm going to say to you, hey, our partner In Stock Trades is putting this through, I want you to feel like afterwards, like, wow, and look, they gave us this podcast that they really put a lot of effort into for us to enjoy. It's why we do this. But this is a story that I think deserved this kind of attention and note, and it's kind of a fun one to explore. Whether it was your cup of tea or not, I'm hoping these episodes are at least fun for you. This one I would definitely follow on, though, if it's your first time to Dark Victory and One in Rome.
Yeah.
Because they're just great stories.
Now, I think one of the things that got me, when Catwoman's watching Sophia give the tie to her father and all that stuff, you feel bad. I felt bad for her. She's this monster of a killer, and she's nasty hardcore, but you kind of feel bad because he just blew off her tie gift. He's like, he was nice enough to say, I appreciate the effort, but you can see the look on his face like, what the heck's this? This is a crappy ass tie. I'm not gonna,
Well, it is clear, too, that Sophie, while she was the thug, she clearly was not, I bet you specifically because she was a female, was not a favored member of the family. It almost is like she became the person that she is, this kind of thuggy person, to get noticed from Dad.
Yeah, she had to prove she had
like
worth.
Alberto. Alberto was kind of under the radar, too, because Carmine's so obsessed with keeping his empire afloat that the two of them seem to be relatively ignored by Dad.
Yeah.
It would be interesting to see Mom and what she was like.
Yeah. Did they ever even mention her?
They don't.
No.
I don't remember if, I'll be honest with you, it's been a long time since I've read Dark Victory and One in Rome. I don't remember if Mom was mentioned there at all either, if there's ever any reference to her. Because this storyline does continue beyond this, so I don't know. We don't get to see Jim Gordon as much as I would like. I would love a book that completely follows the Gotham Police Department again. And it may be happening more with the different viewpoints of the new Gotham, because it does look like we're shifting and taking a look at Batman through the eyes of Batman, through the eyes of Batman and Robin, through the eyes of the city people. So I don't, his son Jim is a particularly interesting thread I would love to see re-explored. What that relationship is and what happened. I'd love to see something that explores the life of Jim Gordon again, and kind of from the current creative teams, I think, working on Batman. Because I'd read that mini. Wouldn't you? Would that be something you'd be interested
God, yeah, in a heartbeat. Yeah. It's one of those things with the network. I was hoping it would be more than the Streets of Gotham. I was hoping it would be more of Jim Gordon and the police. It's Gotham.
And it was, Streets of Gotham was. I really liked how we got more into that. Yeah, I'm hoping it does keep that focus.
Yeah, we did keep more, and I purely just want a Gotham PD. I want Gotham Central back because there's such a cool story that you can have from a police department in this universe. A police department that may have to deal with these meta freaks or these eccentric criminals, not just your regular street punks, not just your regular murders and kidnappings. It takes it to another level. But it's also these people. Gordon is just this great commissioner. He's this great cop that I want to learn. I want to see more of him with him in it. He is a character, and that was why in the movies I just so loved the fact that they made Jim Gordon a real cop. They didn't make him the bumbling lieutenant, the bumbling commissioner that we've seen in the previous Batman movies, where Gordon was a non-figure, a non-entity in the story, and we know he's not. Alfred is not a non-entity. These are characters who are crucial to this universe. That if you're going to accurately tell the tale of Batman, you have to include these people. And if you're accurately going to tell the tale of Batman, you have to include Gotham. Gotham is a character, and one of the the heartbeats of Gotham is its police department, is its people. I want just that story about the city,
that was
about the people.
The Michael Keaton Batman. I really liked that movie, but I'm with you. That was one of the things that I would have liked to have seen more with it. Was more with Jim Gordon. Batman Returns, when they had the Penguin and Catwoman. Jim Gordon had a little bit more of a role in there. I did like the distinction from that one versus the first one, that he and Gordon had more of a partnership at that point. You're right, they didn't. Yeah, I'm not disputing your point, but there was. It was funny with how much I analyzed those films back when they were coming out. There was a shift between those two movies with the relationship. They didn't ever delve into it or really explain it the way that I would have loved to have seen it visually, but it was clear that there was a subtext there that time had passed and their relationship was stronger, and he was more considered a partner to them, at that point. The homemade tie with Jim Gordon and his wife Barbara looking on smiling was so great. The hands, the little handprints of Jim's.
And I love the fact that he just takes off his current tie and puts on that tie right then and there. Boom. No setting it aside. Oh, yeah, I'll wear this, son. No, he's wearing it right then and there. And that was something that I ate up. That's just a cool dad thing to do, to say, wow, this was so important to me. I'm wearing this now. Now, is it a good-looking tie? No. But it was still...
It is to a dad, though.
Well, yeah. Okay, I will give it. Maybe there's probably dads saying, you kidding? That's the greatest tie in the world. Okay, maybe I'm not a dad, but...
No,
I can
I'm
appreciate.
agreeing with you,
I loved that he did that, even though I think it was an ugly tie. I'm like, dude, that was awesome. If someone I worked with came into with a tie like that on, I would not rip him at all about it. I wouldn't ridicule him. I wouldn't laugh at him, because I would know that was made by his son.
Oh, if you look at those handprints, that's
right. A son. Even though I would
Whereas
think
Carmine's tie, on the other hand, if he came in with it, you might poke a little fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is interesting. Dent's dad. Now, see, again, I liked how this Father's Day issue served as kind of a showing how each person's world was a little bit different. Because Dent and Jim, if you look back at the beginning, they somehow seem like equals. But as the story goes on, you begin to see more and more the distinction between the two and how Harvey really is very different. Dent's dad being crazy was an interesting twist to be brought into this. It shows Harvey's issues may have been inherited. The coin coming up from that source almost encouraged the duality. Sitting in the basement in the dark, we see him drift into the madness before he even gets the acid into the face. It's interesting that Harvey seems to realize Wayne is innocent, yet can't accept it because he wants to win so bad. Heads he wins, tails I lose. It's almost like on some level he wanted Wayne to be guilty because high society seems to stay out of helping Gotham, while the working class seems to take care of cleaning up the muck. I wonder if he knew Bruce was Batman, if he would have influenced things with him. Would Harvey have turned out different? Would it have inspired faith in him that could have maybe gotten him past the violation that he goes through when he gets the acid in the face? I don't know.
That's a toughie.
Because you see clearly this bitterness, but what if he all of a sudden realized, wow, everything I've thought was wrong, look at this high society guy who's doing what I'm doing, I can relate so much more. Would that have been something that had given him some comfort even in the face of his own adversity? Here's a guy who lost his parents that were murdered, and look what he did, and how he pulled himself up. Would that story have influenced Harvey in a different way? I don't know.
That's a toughie, because, I always, when I first time ever heard the story of Harvey Dent, it was a long time ago, and it was like, I really didn't. I was like, come on, just because your face got a little scarred up, you turned evil. And I didn't really know the whole nature of Two-Face.
Right.
And every time I read more Two-Face stories, every time I read more of these Harvey Dent, I learned that there was this underlining darkness.
Sure.
That was the trigger. And that underlining darkness is a powerful thing to defeat. That's a powerful thing to control. And we even saw that in the current story arc where, Bruce was able to help, Harvey. He was able to clean up the face, make him, normal. Actually appointed him the Guardian while he was away for 1 year later. And, there was that thing, but there was still that underlining darkness inside Harvey. Even if Bruce had let him know what was going on, if Harvey had full knowledge of it, he still would have turned. Because there is that underlining darkness that, it may have taken longer. Maybe it wouldn't have been the initial acid burn that caused the Two-Face. Maybe it would have been something else down the road. Maybe somewhere later Harvey, would have become the judge. If you remember from that Batman, the animated series where Harvey developed a third personality, that judge personality. Maybe that personality would have popped up.
Maybe.
It wouldn't have been Two-Face, it would have been that guy. Now, there is that underlining darkness in Harvey that... Whether
unavoidable?
It's unavoidable. Whether it's genetics, whether it's upbringing, whether it's the whatnot factor of the universe, he was condemned to be that villain.
Do you think it's something that for him could have been medicated?
Maybe. There could have maybe.
If there could have been a control to it early enough, it could have been.
Yeah.
But then again, there has to be a motivation on his part to want to
take the medicine. Yeah. And it's. I don't know. I personally don't trust, medical solutions to chemical imbalances and psychological problems.
No, but do you
that's me personally. But I know there are people out there who who've had, they've lived a very normal and healthy life because of the chemicals keep them, regulated, keep them normal. And I don't even want to say keep them normal, but keeps their body in line. Keeps, it's the alignment, kind of gets a little skewed. This is their alignment adjustment. This is the thing that helps, everything flow the way it should be.
Let me clarify that, because it was why I made that distinction. He'd have to want it himself. I'm of a fine line with medicine. I think that medicine can help, but I don't think medicine by itself can be the. You can't just say, well, let's medicate. And I think as a teacher, that's where kind of my aspect. I've seen a lot of kids that, people say, oh, let's just medicate them, and, that takes care of hyperactivity, that it takes care of. You still have to teach the kid, and there still has to be a code where you teach this child right from wrong, and that they can't just do whatever they want. And, the fact that they're hyperactive doesn't mean that it's okay for them to do those things. You can't throw that out the window. A lot of times, in my job, it's, oh, this kid's ADD, ADHD, let's medicate him and it's going to solve it. No, that's a piece. But unless you teach the child to be motivated to behave and act a certain way, to follow a certain set of rules, or to do that, it doesn't work. The kid has to internally develop a set of skills too of their own. I would take it the same thing in this case. Harvey has to be motivated to say, okay, I've got this thing that I feel, and I am trying to get control of it myself. I am working to that, but what else can I do? What can give me a little bit of help? I think medication works in those cases when there's motivation there in that purpose as well, not on its own. It's kind of like the, if you're a cigarette smoker, do these patches and things help? Well, if you're throwing them on and thinking you don't have to do anything, no. I'm a big believer that people quit smoking because they want to. I do believe those little tools will help people, and I believe that people have successfully used them to quit because they've wanted to quit. But I think there's people who along the lines think that throwing on the patch is going to make them want to, and that doesn't work. I think it is self-motivation as well. So that's not saying that those little aids don't assist them, those Nicorette gums and things like that. I do think that, yes, they do work for some people because they want them to work, and they make them work, if that makes sense. So I think those are the interesting. So I think that's my distinction there. I'm with you, but I don't know that maybe we're not 100% on that one, because I do feel that, yes, it can help, but there is a human motivation factor that has to be in there. You have to want it.
And part of my feelings about the non-drugs is, you mentioned with the ADD, ADHD and all that. As a kid, if I was a kid present day, I would have been diagnosed attention deficit disorder very easily, because my mind as a kid flew from every possible thing you can imagine. It was never on one task at hand. I had problems sitting still. For me, it was just kind of stuff. Just especially, growing up, going through, high school, I still had issues where I was like focusing problems. College, I had a professor who one time.
Do you still have it?
No. Well, yes and no. I do have periods where I kind of slip into, I'm like, okay, stop, Jim. Think, focus.
Okay, by the very fact that you can do that, you don't need medication.
Right.
I've had kids who can't do that. See, that's where the fine line is. For some of the kids that I've had that have done it, I'm not a doctor, so I'm not qualified, and I have never in my career diagnosed or looked at a kid and said they need medication. It's not my job. I'm not qualified for that. I'm not trained for that. I've seen kids who, on the days when they don't have their medication, can't do what you just said. They can't.
Right.
And the medication helps them to get to the point where they can say, stop. When you over-medicate the kid, it's when the medication totally handles it, and that becomes a huge problem. Medication for a kid with ADHD who truly has it. I mean, I've got kids who the parents have come to me and said, we worked for years with our child. This is what they needed. There's been a lot of parent work. There's been a lot of, and they went to a doctor, and, they've approached me and told me it right at the start of the year. They're very involved, and they're really working with their child to develop a skill set where their child can cope with just what you're saying. These kids can't do what you just said. That's the distinction. I think I could be diagnosed with it.
Yeah.
Because I'm very flighty at times. In myself, there's times where I get, I have the attention span of a 10-year-old. I get I have multiple hobbies. I get distracted easily by a number of different things. I'm still like a child to this day. But I mean, but the difference is when I need to, I can stop myself.
We can focus ourselves. Now,
I know that I have, and that's the difference. It's the kids that need medication are the ones who can't get to that point.
Yeah, see, but
adults, there are adults who need that too.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I'm like, I can do that now, but there were times, when I couldn't do that, where I just would be all over the place. And, I've had other, addictions that I've, focused, faced, and said, okay, I have a problem with this. I have to stop this now. And I've had, and it's one of those things where I don't know. I don't want to say, look at me, how powerful and wonderful I am. I'm not. I have these imperfections. I have these issues and these problems that every day I deal and I address. And I have to confront and know that, okay, you got to let go that you don't have complete power over. You don't have complete control over, but you have to sometimes, you sit down, you knuckle up, you focus, and you draw it in. That's where my personal adversity to medicine is. Now, I'm agreeing with you when you say there's a lot of kids who need it.
I've actually got an argument on the other side, too, and I'll tell you that after you're done.
And I completely agree with you. There are people out there who need it. There are people out there who don't need it, who get it, who should be pulled off of it, because they can learn, they can learn what I learned. I probably wasn't really at ADD. I was probably at the borderline where, it could be worked through. It could be worked through naturally. I worked through it through encouragement of my parents and just, my personal recognition of problems and issues. So for me, there was a lot of support and love that came from my mom and dad that helped me get through this. If I had a big project that I was working on, I'd be panicking because I didn't have it all done. I'm running around like a madman. And I was like, okay, what do we got to do? Focus on what you have to do, not what you didn't do. Don't focus on the fact that I should have started this a month ago. Focus on now it has to be done. And it was those type of disciplines that I learned from my family, from my parents, from my older brothers and sisters that helped me guide this and help me control my problems.
Believe me, my worst years of my life, where it took me forever to get things done and do stuff like that, you could easily say, well, geez, dude's got ADD, ADHD, whatever. Sure, okay, you could, but the difference is I can also stop myself. I can do that. I don't need medication to do that. I can mentally, do that. In the scenario what I mentioned with the kid in question, good parents, good home. Rules at home, consequences, teaching the kid right from wrong, yes and no, things like that. Same thing in your case. So the example with the kid is a kid that can't stop under those conditions. That's where you have to look at other sources. And that's where parents need to make that call. That's not my place. I'll give you another scenario. A kid who I would never in a million years say that needs to be medicated. I had a student where I have a very consistent structure. My day-to-day layout of the class and the class rules, things like that, it's very consistent. So a child, they could miss a whole week. They know when they come back the next Monday what Monday starts like every week. They should know when they walk in the room what the schedule is going to be, what bell work will be, things like that. My room has to the point where when a teacher comes into my room to substitute, they read a novel, okay? So you would think any child who works in that scenario eventually should get with the program, right? If they're worked with. The problem is, and it's just a harsh reality of it, is I would say 80 to 90% of my classes every year, the parents are great parents who work really hard with their kids. I'm very lucky in where I work. I love them. You every so often get a parent scenario where there's no rules at home, or when, this particular case that I'm thinking of, when mom was out of town, the kid knew that dad did not care about rules, and would even go as far as to say anything that mom says when she's normally there is out the window. This kid, wonderful kid. I loved him. But, his concept of consistency and what's right from wrong, yes and no, rules are thrown out the window. When mom's there, it's not fun. And those type of inconsistencies, what that does to a kid is that a kid that can't control himself or needs to be medicated. No, there's a kid who needs a consistent set of rules at home. That's why I was having problems with getting him on it, because he doesn't understand how to stay consistent all the time. That's the difference. I think that's a distinction where, when do you look to medicine for it? Well, when you've got a kid who, the perfect scenario across the board, and they just can't get to the point, like you said, where they can control themselves. I think that's with Harvey. He's a case where I would love to see a further explanation of his childhood, of his life. What an interesting case study this guy is. Would medication have helped him? Would it not have? Obviously Dad was nuts. How long was Dad nuts? What did that do to this guy? How did he wind up being who he is? Was it a traumatic event in his life? It's such an interesting mental study. It's like Bruce is. This guy is, a tragedy.
We talk about just like series and things we'd like to see. I would love to see either a limited series or a mega series where they explore the childhoods and births and the villains. Of the villains,
Mm-hmm.
Of guys like Harvey. You can't do Joker because you really can't lay out who the Joker is, but you could do.
Ooh. Could you imagine? I would buy a series that told the life story of the Joker.
Oh God, yeah.
12 issues went through his childhood straight on through to when he becomes a Joker. Like, you don't see him as the Joker until the end.
Right. But I think they like keeping the whole mystery of who and what the Joker is.
Sure.
So that's why I say you can't really do the Joker.
Well,
but
they did Wolverine Origin, though, which, I mean, I never, as a kid, when I first started reading Wolverine, I thought I'd never see that. And I think there comes a point in time where you've told so many stories with a character that going there adds to that dynamic. Bruce's story, if you look back to his original beginnings, wasn't anywhere near as fleshed out as it is today. They didn't need, and that's not a knock on the original stories. They were exploring different things that were fun to explore and introduce at that time. There came a point where if you want to add a new dynamic to the character, let's go deeper into what makes this guy, what drives him. And I think that's why that's expanded over time, because it was interesting and they needed something new to freshen him up a little bit. So they went that route. And I do think there comes a point with the Joker where, I mean, I think we've seen it now. Morrison tried to do some new things with the Joker. Brian Azzarello in the hardcover did some new things that I thought were unique with the Joker. I think, we may get that story at some point because it might be interesting.
Yeah, that would be something I would love.
Yeah.
And I would jump all over that. And actually, even any of these villains, like, the Penguin, he is just such a really cool, just that combination of mob boss and the freak character that I would love to see that.
Wait, I've got it. 12 issues, one whole year. The Joker telling his life story.
Oh, God.
Now, and the reason why I say the Joker telling it, if you take a look at, remember that in the back of 52,
yeah,
when they were doing the origins, and they did was the Joker one in 52 or was it in Countdown? I don't remember.
Joker was in Countdown.
Okay, Joker was in Countdown. When they did that, you remember how they alluded to the fact that what is the real origin of the Joker? If the Joker tells it, you don't have to necessarily tell. You could tell more than one version and kind of skirt around it, but I think it would be fun to explore and say there are elements of reality to both and know that the truth is in there somewhere, but never really having the definitive answer. I think that would be interesting as an exploration. Two-Face.
Yeah, Two-Face is really the one I'd like to see. It would be interesting to explore it
in the Harvey persona and in the Two-Face persona, to see the elements of both from both perspectives.
Oh, God.
What does Two-Face's childhood look like from his dark side? What does it look like from the other side? That's the way you do it.
When is the birth of Two-Face?
Yes.
It's,
But I'm saying go through his whole childhood, though, and even though maybe that dark persona wasn't, you didn't see that dark persona in his childhood.
But he was
How
there.
does the dark persona, He was
there and watching and learning and waiting for the
Right.
time when it's time for him to step up.
Mm-hmm.
And that acid hitting the face was just like, okay, it's my time now.
And how does that twisted persona see those events?
Yeah.
And still having these question marks as far as what was that event really like, because both personas see it differently, and knowing the truth is somewhere in the middle. Do you really need to reveal it in 100% in truth then? No. Seeing the different perspectives is a great way to do it and leave the mystery there and leave you as the reader the opportunity. So both of those series, I think, would be interesting explorations of those characters. I think that's why we went on this little tangent about what is it like in real life, because I think these characters can be fleshed out like real life situations like we're imagining. What would Harvey be like if they tried to do that? Maybe they did. You don't know.
Yeah.
Was Harvey ever medicated? What was his childhood like? It's clear there's issues there, and did anybody ever notice it? Or was his childhood one where nobody would notice? Dad was crazy. What was Mom like? Was Mom so busy trying to run a household? Was Dad present?
Yeah,
Mom might have been so busy that...
I'm going to guess Dad was present,
Yeah.
and that was part of the problem.
Maybe. Or it could be the other way around, where because of Dad's issues, he wasn't present, and...
Yeah.
Or when he was there, he riled everything up. When he wasn't there, Mom was so busy trying to hold things together, she didn't notice what was going on with her kid. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities there where you could explore it.
And it's funny. And
reality plays into it.
And this just popped in my head. Do you ever see the Rob Zombie remake of Halloween?
Yes.
I absolutely loved that.
Yes.
I didn't really like the original Halloween. I wasn't a big Halloween fan.
I was, but but the Rob Zombie one, I was
loved
a step
it.
up. You're right.
It's a difference of, okay, yeah, all right, hacker. That was like a real movie, and that was just like this exploration. I'm like, oh man,
do
this
you
is
like
awesome.
B-movie horror?
See, I'm not a big B-movie horror fan. So that's why I was like, It's same thing.
But I'll agree with you that there is a distinction between the two movies and how they were presented, and the psychological nature of the remake was
of
really
who
great.
Michael Myers is, why he does what he does, and it's that type of thing that's what I want to see. But that story of Harvey Dent, of Two-Face, and that'd be awesome.
See, I'm a big horror fan, and everything from B-movie to that type of stuff, and I agree with you though. There was a definite distinction between the two, and I like that. That's a great example though of what I'm talking about. You could do an exploration of that time, where it doesn't necessarily have to counteract anything you've seen before, but have some fun with it. Pat a cake, baker's man. Bake me a cake as fast as you can. Roll it, pat it, mark it with a B, and put it in the oven for Batman and... What do you think he was making there? We talked about this before we started recording. What was he doing there? Because we never see.
Yeah, we never really see him do anything with that. It could have been just another batch of his funky juice or something. His Joker gas. Yeah, not Joker gas. Scarecrow gas. Yeah. You know what I meant.
Yeah, I know exactly what you meant.
But it could be that. I don't think he actually was making anything. It was just being himself.
Scarecrow and Jervis make so much sense together. One from Wizard of Oz, one from Alice in Wonderland. The arguments show both obsessions. Again, this story's a lot about obsession and what it does to people. This, I think many of Batman's villains fail because of their quirks. And, Ivy with her saving the plants and that whole, she will literally, in the middle of winning a battle, if a plant's she will stop what she's doing to save this plant, which, I respect because that's like her kid to her. But, those are just great examples of quirks. Falcone, the voice of reason here in this case, and almost impatient with them, shows another reason why I won't work with them. Now, the attack on the bank depository. Falcone has his money there, right? Is he doing some form of fraud? What is he doing here? Because that was the one thing you and I debated this at the beginning.
We started the debate, and you're saying, is he like double dipping? And there is a term in the fraud environment called double dipping. And what that is when there's various ways you do it. The most common way is you would have a friend, a cousin, a family member, or somebody go in, withdraw your money from your account, saying that you are them.
Right.
And then I would go and say, hey, I didn't do the withdrawal. Pull up the tape. You'll see it's not me. And and you're in the investigation. So here you have this unknown person who had your driver's license, who had all your stuff. Like, well, how did he get that? I don't know. It must have been a fake.
Well, here's where I think it's the exact same thing. Well, instead of going in and having them withdraw it by using an ID, he's going in and having them pull it out.
Yeah.
And he's not doing it, they're doing it for him.
Yeah, so
and he can go in now and, when the bank was ripped off and all that, he can withdraw his money, and yet he already has it.
But the only difference...
Because he just put it in, didn't he?
Yeah. The only difference being between them is... with the double dip, the person who is not actually a victim is saying they're a victim.
Right.
With this, Falcone's never a victim. The bank got robbed. It's just like if somebody went in, robbed the bank, and then he went in and withdrew his account. That's not the same. You're trying to get the same money.
Okay.
You're trying to double up your money that you have in the bank. What he's doing is bank robbery.
Right. And the terminology is wrong.
Right.
But here's the issue. It's bank robbery specifically with his own money because it was so recently put in.
Right.
That I'm gathering, Bruce just made the turn. He just got to deposit his money in. Now he is going and taking it back out again, and the bank has to honor that money because he deposited it.
I think it's something different. Mm-hmm. Bruce, let him put the money in. Bruce stopped that now. Bruce is back in control. He's been back in control for a couple months now. Mm-hmm. So Bruce has already gotten his money out of the bank. Now this is payback for what Bruce did. I'm going to pay. He's like, I'm going to teach the bank. You do not mess with Falcone. I'm going to get.
We never see. Yeah, I think
that's an off-camera. I think that's an off-camera thing, and for me, it's just an immediate assumption that as soon as Bruce got in power, as soon as Ivy influence was done, he's like, okay, I got to clean house. First thing I got to do is I got to get him out of the bank now. And it was
you do that?
Yeah, you can.
On what grounds?
You don't need grounds, actually. A bank can kick somebody. You can fire a customer as long as you're not doing it for the protected class. You can't get rid of a client because of their sex, because of their race, or because of their age.
Okay.
You do not have to give a reason for.
Wow. Was that always the case?
That's always been the case. Yeah.
Okay.
Now a lot of banks are scared to do that because they don't want someone to try
Bruce
to make waves, and they don't want them to come back and try to sue them because public influence on a bank is a huge factor. So they're gonna wait. Usually banks will wait and see. Okay, we have this reason to get rid of somebody. Get rid of them now. But with this, they're just going to say, you know what, Mr. Falcone, we've changed our mind. We are not going to do business with you. Here is a check for your holdings. Have a nice day.
So that makes a lot more sense of what he's doing here to me.
Yeah, and it was funny. I didn't even think of it when we were talking. It wasn't until we started talking about with Bruce losing control and getting control back. So this is payback this is Falcone paying back the bank, saying, "You kick me out, fine. I'm going to show you what happens when you mess with me. I'm going to hit you hard."
So that's why he has the two of them.
That's why he has them do it, so nothing comes back to him. It goes back to these psychopaths, these crazy nut jobs. But he gets the money. Well,
or in theory,
he'll get a piece of the action.
Right. Well, probably a major piece of it, and
that's probably
they get a payment for doing it.
Yeah, probably. But you never know when dealing with these guys. If you're gonna, that's the thing. Yeah. It's that code we talked about.
Well.
You hire bank robbers.
In this case, it looks like he got Tetch out,
yeah,
and he got Scarecrow out, and part of the condition was that they pull this bank job for him.
Right.
So I'm willing to bet he's getting most of the money in exchange for them helping
freedom.
Him.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure they're getting payment too, but I think he's getting a bigger piece of this than you're thinking.
Well, no, I'm saying that's the deal that was laid out.
Well, but you can't trust them, which is why it goes back to why would he want to work with them to begin with.
Exactly.
Right? Your father would have done that for anyone who came through the door. That was his way. Interesting discussion over how different Gotham would have been if he hadn't saved Falcone. Although it could have been argued that the corruption would have been the same, just that Maroni would have been in charge instead of Luigi Maroni would have been running the show.
Or somebody else.
Right.
Who knows? Maybe the guy who replaced him would have been 10 times worse.
Right. Alfred's reflection. Now, I take it Bruce walking away meant he didn't hear Alfred's comments about being a different sort of father to him? Do you take that like that was kind of Alfred's inner dialogue with himself?
Yeah.
He was talking. I don't think Bruce heard that.
Yeah, I think that was inner.
I do like, though, that Alfred acknowledges himself, as Bruce does sometimes, as the surrogate parent. I like those moments where Bruce will get personal with Alfred and, call him the father, especially in the recent storytelling, where he acknowledges him as a great dad, and Alfred acknowledges that he lost a son, because he is. I mean, he raised this boy since his parents died.
Now it's funny because we're talking about, one thought that always pops in my head is, what if Alfred didn't go along with the training? What if Alfred said, Bruce, no, this is a stupid idea. Instead of becoming Batman, why don't we start donating and we bring in some honest cops, we bring in some honest DAs? What if Alfred had done it? What if Alfred had been that voice of reason instead of the...
Bruce would have rebelled.
Yeah.
Bruce would have rebelled. I do think that Alfred is the reason that Bruce is a force for good and has lines that he wouldn't cross. He taught him morality. He went along with him and guided him in his quest versus fighting against him. He became a partner instead of an adversary. I think Bruce was so driven to obsession. We go back to what is that line that separates Bruce from Harvey, Bruce from the Joker, Bruce from... You're right. You could make an argument that Bruce needs to be locked up and the key thrown away. You could make that argument, but I think the distinction there, Alfred Pennyworth is one of the distinctions there in this particular... So I think you're 100% correct that it would have been different, but I don't think that would have meant that Bruce would have been a DA or anything like that. I think it would have been Bruce rebelling against it. I think he was so scarred emotionally that... Because what makes a man do this?
Yeah.
I mean... Maybe in many ways keeping him out of an asylum because of that, I think. Because Bruce could have easily grown into what he fights. I mean, we could discuss this for hours, but it is why he needs the mask. What he does is illegal, and I think he would have headed down that path regardless. But I think it's why the Two-Face discussion is so interesting in this, because in many ways I think Alfred is what kept him from being Two-Face.
It could be, yeah, definitely.
And it's guiding his obsession instead. He, in many ways, helped Bruce embrace his obsession and guide it in the right way. Versus, it is interesting. I don't know if guiding it in the right way is the right choice, because Alfred's right to a certain extent of what he's saying. What could I have done? I don't know in this case, because Bruce has deep scars. Yeah. He really, at some point, needed to be locked up.
He had issues,
arguably. Or, needed to be seeing someone for some deep psychological issues. And a kid that, who knows? It is that's part of the tragedy of this. The reason why stories like that are tragedies is, what do you do for the person in that case? What works? The success stories, it's why people note them so much, is because it's so shocking when people are able to get past those things. That is hard to get past. That's a horrible event to go through. It's why they're called emotional scars. Scars don't always heal.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting case study. The law in Gotham, the law that accepts him just accepts him as necessary. And I do like the bits where we see him break down. I just miss him. Is that so wrong? Those parts where you see that it's deep and rooted emotions. This is the grown man who still at this stage is crying over these events.
There's still the kid inside him that is still crying out. And when that whole... the Green Lantern thing back when, I think it was like, dad? I was with like issue 9 when Hal and Bruce were interacting, and he put on the ring, and it was like you had to absorb and just, utilize the anger, utilize that pain, focus on that, bring that in, and dissipate it. And then he would be able to really use the ring and all that. And Bruce is like, I'm not ready to let go. It was that great scene when you saw that half Batman, half Green Lantern costume.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite issues of that book.
And it was just this cool,
the variant cover of that is gorgeous.
It's just the thought process that, goes through that process. Right there, that was a very telling tale of Bruce that he doesn't want to let this go yet. He can't let this go. It is the fuel in the fire.
I bought 2 of that variant cover. The funny story is I bought it because I wanted to get it signed by the creative team eventually. And I got the first one signed by Jeff Johns. And then I went to go see Ethan Van Sciver to have it signed, and Moose Ballman was there too, the colorist on it. So it was great. You got an opportunity to get a few more of the creators on that, because the colors on that are really sharp as well. So I get it signed, and it was at Wizard World Chicago, and with the show, Jim and I are running to the DC panels to try and get the news for the podcast, good podcast stuff. So I get it signed, and usually I'm really good when I get a book signed at remembering to leave it out of the cover. The bag and board, and let it dry. I literally, because Ethan's line was so long, I had just gotten Ethan, I needed to rush to a panel to report for the show. I didn't want to get the book to get damaged in my mad rush to get there, so I stuck it right back in the bag and board. Well, I guess the moral of the story is this smeared. So I literally, and this is how much I like the cover, though. I went back to Ethan later and said, "Is there anything you can do?" And he did an admirable job of trying to correct it. And you could tell it was just like, oh, my heart. I just said, dude, you have no idea. I love this work of yours. I said, I'm sorry to even bring this back to you. I just wanted to see if we could correct it in some way because I love the piece. He did a great job. I mean, he actually fixed it to the point where it was pretty darn good, considering that it's smeared. But I liked it so much that I wanted it perfect, so I bought a second one. So I have 2 of that cover now. I sought it out, and you got to understand, by the time I sought it out again, that variant was going for a premium. Because it is, Batman as Green Lantern is done by Ethan Van Sciver on a variant cover, which was a limited amount anyway. And I ended up grabbing another one and having him, do it again. And needless to say, I kept that thing out of the bag and board for about half a day at the con, walking around carefully holding it, everywhere I went. But it was Mid Ohio that I got it. I got the new one signed, and that was it was fun. But great example of a book that I'll probably never forget because of that story. But back to Alfred talking about, I just miss him, is that so wrong? You are very much your father's son. Such a true statement because Bruce tends to save lives regardless, hero or villain. And that is something that he inherited from his dad, and that's a code he won't break, honoring his parents as going through this. Maroni comes to Dent to make a deal. Yes, Dent wants him, but he wants Falcone more, and Maroni's willing to give him up because he believes that holiday attacks were directed at him because of Falcone. So, and notice that he came to Vernon first. Vernon's the one that gets Dent out of bed, and what did you get me out here this early in the for? And that was the interesting way to close off the issue, that the two of them were going to work together. This book is just a great, great read, and
I know
it's one every time I think in different directions, different tangents. I think about things like you did. With the bank, off the
just
page,
everything goes off
we don't see what did happen off the page,
and
we don't have a definite answer on some of those things. Like when we were talking about the bank thing, did Bruce get back in it? We never really get the full story on that, but I can totally see that being a possibility of what happened. I'm glad we got a chance to really delve into this.
There they are, all alone, except for that old character.
Jim and I, we had some technical difficulties on this. We were actually supposed to record 2 episodes today, and we've been having issues with Skype, which I think is driver-related on my sound card at the moment. And because we didn't have time to do that, voicemails we're going to save for next episode, because that'll give me the week to figure out exactly what our problem is. Because I want to get this show out tonight.
Whenever we record off of the Skype and whatnot, all that, the voices sound like Doctor Who villains.
They do, yeah. We sound like Doctor Who villains.
Kind of sound to it. And I was just expecting to hear Doctor, in there.
Which is an easy fix, because, typically what I'll do is I'll uninstall drivers, I'll uninstall the programs, then I reinstall everything, it'll be great. The problem is, when Jim and I are recording, especially when we were trying to record 2 shows today with a guest, it's really hard to do all that when you're under a rush. I'd rather just do it when... So we're going to do some Speeding Bullets right now, and talk a little Green Lantern, because we're heading into Blackest Night, and like you, we are very excited about it, so we're going to talk kind of a little casually, more than cover to cover, about some of the events recently in 41 and 42 with Agent Orange.
I am digging the Orange Lanterns, and the whole concept of that there is only one.
Mine.
And it's the greed. Orange, the emotion is greed, so naturally you wouldn't have more than one. You can't share the power because you're greedy. You only want the one. It's only you. At first when I was thinking orange and only the one, I was thinking, okay, there's only one unit. There's only one sector they're in. And I'm like, no. 1 sector, 100 sectors, it does not matter. There's only going to always be one Orange Lantern because he will never share the power. And throughout the 41 and 42, we get a little bit more of the nature of the power. Right. That it's, this lantern is completely different than the other lanterns. It is more of a physical living entity. It reminds me a lot of, there's probably maybe a version of Parallax or some type of living entity that's inside the lantern that's powering the lantern. Mm-hmm. We have like the ion power inside the Green Lantern. We have Parallax inside the yellow. There's got to be something else inside the orange. And maybe all of the lanterns have this physical type entity.
That's a manifestation of that particular emotion?
Yeah. I'm thinking it's, in this wide theory I have, I don't know, I could be completely off, but it just made sense, especially some of the parts of 42 where Hal is interacting with the Lantern.
So you're thinking the anti-monitor is the manifestation, or could be the manifestation of death.
Of the Black Lantern.
Could be.
Right.
We don't know the nature yet. There might be something else at work there, but at least temporarily, it's an interesting working theory.
Yeah.
I do like in 41 when they did the exploration of this guy's race.
Yes.
And there actually was a whole race that came seeking this out, but it could only be one.
Yeah, that was absolutely beautiful. It was 5 thieves who were trying to steal the ultimate power in the universe, and they get, while they're taking, they get this some mystic little box that they don't know what it is, but they also get this map from Krona. And I was like, oh, cool, bringing back in, the ancient story of him, the pre-Guardian, pre-Core type guy that, has been this mystic, massive bad guy
Such
for
a
the
big
Green
piece
Lantern
in Trinity,
Corps.
too, and I really do like that elements of that great story, Trinity. It shows that Trinity pulled so much from the DC universe in its presentation. It's one thing. Trinity is another one. If you didn't read Trinity, do yourself a favor and pick up the trades of that book, because it so encompasses everything that's great about DC. And whatever you're a fan of, you'll enjoy reading Trinity.
Yeah, and I love the story when they're telling the 5 thieves though, because they got greedy. They wanted to take too much, and the Manhunters come flying in, bam, bam, one by one. They're getting blasted away. They land on the planet. One guy gets eaten up by some plant on the planet, and it ends up being the final 2 are land and get the they both grab the Orange Lantern at the same time, just as the Guardians are coming in. And even as the Guardians are coming in, these 2 are fighting off the Guardians, killing off Manhunters, and it was cool to see them shifted into discipline, into a diplomatic situation, saying, hey, we will give you this one sector of space. We will leave it alone. The orange light can burn on brightly for all of time. We won't mess with you, but there can only be one. And that just, I tell you, that they ate right, they fed right into, what is the nature of the orange? What is the nature of greed? And the price for them to make this little deal with him was that one little box that they stole. Of course, we find out that in that little box was Parallax. And it was just a nice extra play on to the whole mythos and genre that is, the Green Lantern Corps. You see just how old and ancient this that this lantern is. Like, the Blue Lanterns were just recently created by Ganthet and what's her name? I can't think of the female one.
I'm drawing a blank at the moment too.
So that was a recent one.
Is it Sayid or Sayd? Is that the one?
Maybe that's her name. And like the Sinestro
Sayid, Sayd, yes.
Sinestro Corps is just recently created, so all these other lanterns are recently created, but the orange isn't. This is a long time running thing that has been basically remained hidden, and because of this whole Blackest Night prelude has started, getting invoked. And
you have to wonder if the Guardians, it's kind of the question mark right here, because the Guardians really, to me, are to blame for a lot of this with their laws. Too many laws provide opportunities. What if they had embraced emotion instead of rejecting it? Would we be in this position now, or would these all be together? Would there be like a rainbow lantern or something like that? What would have the lanterns look like? What would the power look like? Would it be completely harnessed in a different way? I don't know.
Well, and that's part of the whole reason why Scar, the turncoat lantern, is actually making these laws, helping her brothers see that this emotion's bad, right. And we need to, and she keeps pushing and pushing, and pushing the laws because she sees what's going on.
Right.
She sees how it's corrupting thing. And the Guardians have had a history of not really being able to put themselves on the level of the human side, or even the individual lantern side, the alien side. They only see what they see and how they are. Yeah, they're not. They're too high and mighty. They're too up, and they can't bring themselves down.
In the most recent issue, Hal says it best. The children are set off to the side while the adults go to talk. That is how they're viewed. They're viewed as their kids versus being respected as equals, as someone that they can learn from, which is an interesting distinction here.
Now, I tell you, one of the things that has really always impressed me about Green Lantern and even Green Lantern Corps is just the splash, this color team. You know, these art teams that they have on this, but especially the colorists. I really, really appreciate, what they're doing. Because especially with this title, you have the orange, which is typically a kind of a brighter color. They keep it a little bit subdued, but there's still the flares up of emotion. When Gonzo gets going, when he gets mad, and he gets ready to fire up, you see that flare color, but there's still the darker undertones. Yeah. Then you get the moments when Hal's interacting with him. You got the Hal with the bright green and also with his bright blue. So you got these other color contrasts that are mixing on this page, and it's going right along with this, action fight sequences of these manifests that the Orange Lantern's creating to fight the Green Lanterns.
Constructs.
The constructs, and you're just... it is just one of those visually pleasing books that I usually will just sit back, I read the story, I read the words, but then I go back and I read it a second time, but without reading the words, just looking at the pictures, enjoying the artwork. There's a lot of work that goes into these titles that are just... it's really impressive, and it's one of those things. I really traditionally love the Green Lantern Corps for the coloring, just because the color is so important. It's the flare of the emotions, even when it's just them using their powers, depending on how angry they are, how much backing they're putting behind, how much concentration. You'll see a brighter green or a lighter green. Maybe it's being broken down by another color. It's these variations and the melding of the fusing of these power sets that have just kind of like really been a cool thing for me.
I would love to see a Where's Whatnot Now of the melding of the Sensei of Whatnot with Jim Seguelin.
I hate you.
Yeah, or you melding something, maybe not even that, maybe the Sensei of Whatnot melding something together. What does that look like? What is that? So if anybody listening, because along with this episode, there are a few new Where's Whatnot Nows from the great Mike Sims, but if anybody out there has any idea on what a melding actually looks like...
Dude, given that horrific spoiler warning, you don't think we're going to get some stuff off of that one?
Oh, but melding, like what was the last word that you had that we got a Where's What
Well, we had some contabulations.
Of? Yeah, contabulations, that's exactly it. So I'd love to see meldings. I would like to see listener definitions of meldings. What does that mean exactly? You were complimenting on the art, and I want to Nai Ruffino and Rod Rice or Reese, and I apologize, it's R-E-I-S, are on the colors. And we also had an art on this one. It was Philip Tan and Jonathan Glapian on pencils and inks, and Eddie Barrows and Ree Jose on pencils and inks. And great art teams, and I got to compliment editorial on their art team choices for this book, because you've got two different teams that were working on issue 42, and I would have sworn, looking through it, that it was the same art team all the way through. And that's not insulting to say that there's no difference between the two. Eddie Barrows, we've loved on Teen Titans. Yeah. And Philip Tan, obviously since this particular book, and of course Final Crisis Revelations, which was absolutely gorgeous. So it's not an insult to either art team. It's a compliment that they... on editorial for making this choice on both art teams for making this book look so consistently good all the way through issue 42, because this was really a sharp issue.
And I want to say Nai Ruffino worked on Revelations as well.
The coloring?
Yeah,
I'm
almost positive that
I don't remember off the top of my head.
She worked on that, but once again, I know there's one of the Final Crises, one of those side stories. She worked on. I could have swore it was Revelations, but I'm not 100% certain right now. So.
This particular one, though, I loved the opening in issue 42 where we see the ruse by the Blue Ring.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't Hal who did it. It was a defensive mechanism of the Blue Ring, giving the hope that our good friend Larfleeze wanted, giving
Gonzo.
Larfleeze the ring. And Gonzo, yeah. it is funny, though, that the... tore Hal's hand up. I thought we were going to have to deal with the fact that Hal lost a limb.
Yeah, I was laughing. Well, I was laughing in a sick, twisted way, because I was like, Hal bartered the ring for the origin of the Orange Lanterns. And personally, I'm like, okay, yeah, knowledge is power, and that's a good thing, but I think he gave up too much. in that deal. And when he couldn't remove the ring, Larfy just takes a big old axe construct and hacks off his arm, and then he gets the blue ring, and I'm like, oh my god, what are we going to... And we see it's all just a illusion, kind of a trick on the blue ring's part, and I was like, dang, that's cool. I like this little twist with the blue ring.
And I like that Hal explained that he's still being overpowered because of that. And look at the constructs he's able to create. Why, you thief, you stole my idea. He creates a whole army of the people closest to him, the heroes that he most rely on, past and present, to fight with him against this enemy. And I really, really liked that.
Now,
I did like Hal's inner dialogue when you were talking about Gonzo, that the name was driving him crazy because he couldn't remember it.
He's like, this guy looks like that Muppet, the one who hangs out with the chickens. And he couldn't think of the name until just now. And one of the things that I'm digging about Green Lantern and Green Lantern Corps is we have some of these crossover stories. We have the stuff with John Stewart dealing with the Star Sapphires. We have, Ash and... what's his name? Sarek looking for the Anti-Monitor. And most of these stories are primarily in Green Lantern Corps, but we're getting these bits and crossovers in Green Lantern as well.
Well, and the Star Sapphires here makes sense because John Stewart is predominantly featured in the Green Lantern book with Hal, because they're, buddies in that particular sector. I did like that because of the rich history between Yura, call me Yura, for Fatality, and John, and how, his wife's death and the death of that planet is something that's haunted John for so long. And how we get to see more that how becoming a Star Sapphire has allowed her to forgive herself. John needs to learn that forgiveness as well. And I'm curious to see, are they going to be good or bad in this upcoming battle? What are they going to be? What is their actual role?
Yeah, it's going to be weird because, we know Carol Ferris is, going to turn over to the Star Sapphires. Because we've seen these...
I think she already has, yeah.
Yeah, she's already, gone over. So it's, you have that, and then you have this right here, Fatality, is, she's forgiven him. She's, become, a quote-unquote good person.
They're not for good reasons, though. It's really because when you think about Carol Ferris, it's because of a horrible loss and of Hal.
Yeah,
a loss of that love. In Fatality's case, it's a loss of her people.
It's the empty hole in their heart
that they need to fill with love.
And they're going to fill it with love. Yeah. Now, once again, is this going to be good or bad?
It sounds
good,
yeah.
But is it really? And we've even seen them try to rehabilitate some of the green, some of the yellow lanterns, some of the Sinestro Corps to try to come across and come over to the come over to the light, come over to the love,
right?
And it's they just need a big hug.
But are they going to be more like a cult or what?
Yeah.
I see the potential of them skirting a fine line because traditionally the Star Sapphire has not been a good guy.
No. It's been the enemy of the Green Lantern, so we'll see where this goes. Is this going to be a shift in the Star Sapphire, or is this going to be one of those situations where you're like, we got to deal with them now? Now, I love just how this story kind of wrapped up in the ending. We see, once again, the Guardians deal with them diplomatically, but not in the best and positive way. They started talking, this fight is raging on. You have some serious heavy hitters in the Corps. You have Guardians there throwing down with this Orange Lantern. And it's one Orange Lantern, but he's got the direct power, direct tie-ins to his own battery right there. 436% strength, and he's just creating these massive constructs, and it's just battle.
7,839% was when he was pissed off at his most.
Right.
I mean, wow.
Yeah, that's some serious power throwing down there. And
it's why one guy can hold his own against so many people from the Green Lantern
because he's
Corps.
got that much power backing him. And in a way, I like seeing the Guardians go with the diplomatic way, but in the other way, I was like, you know what? This is going to bite them in the rear. This is going to come back to haunt them. Because in the end, we see... they're like, we have something you want. And that's when, the Guardians dismiss their Green Lanterns. Say, hey, you go out there, we'll deal with this.
But you remember, the Guardians put him there to begin with. And they want to keep things the way they've had them set. They're looking to maintain a status quo that they felt has been for the best for so long. And they've shown here that they're not against letting Larfleeze have what he wants because it also serves their purposes. They don't want there to be Blue Lanterns.
Right.
They don't like the unknown. They don't like this power. They did not want it a part of Hal Jordan. They were talking to him like he was almost infected with something when he, their treatment of him in 41 was they treated him like he was scum.
They treat him like he was a criminal. Like
and they actually
here
they do too, because it's his own. They're saying you're not following. Your rebellious nature is what's causing a lot of this. I got a funny feeling there's a big talking to coming to Hal if they can find the time to do it.
Yeah, and that's going to just lead to even more problems.
Right.
Yeah, you think about it. Hal, so far, he's been a Yellow Lantern, he's been a Orange Lantern, he's been a Red Lantern now, and he's been a Blue Lantern. Mm-hmm. So he's got a couple more to go through.
But he's also overcome
he's going to have the whole gambit.
All of that.
Yeah.
In every case,
yeah.
It was funny.
Well, the orange kind of got stripped from him.
No, he...
Yeah,
yeah, that's true.
He grabbed the Orange Lantern to try to, weaken Larfleeze.
Well, that's a good point, because he took it, and it says right here, your life won't be complete without your own guardian. You could really go for a hamburger right now, couldn't you? 2 hamburgers. It should all be yours, Jordan. And you see him in a very small window go, mine. But then he goes, is not. And that doesn't belong to you. Don't you dare dent it. It's in mint condition. And it was funny, he pulled them all... when he got that power, is because he pulled all of his constructs back to, kind of recombine and refocus and gather his power. It was interesting how the constructs being out weakened his lantern. Pulling that back in gave him power to redirect it the way that he wants to. So he doesn't really use a ring, per se, as much as...
He uses a lantern.
He uses the complete power of the lantern itself to be a weapon, which was really interesting to see that that difference between the two.
Now, I tell you, I really did not like the Guardians selling out the Blue Lanterns, because that's what Orange wanted. Mm-hmm. All he wanted, the exchange for him to stop the feud was, you just tell me where I can find where can I find a blue ring, and that was what he was going after. And the ending of this issue, we see the Blue Lanterns kind of gathering, they're kind of assembling, getting ready, and you just see the orange hue of Gonzo coming in after him. And who knows what type of offensive weaponry the Blue Lanterns have. I thought they needed to be around a Green Lantern to really accent it, mm-hmm. But we saw the Blue Ring fight off the Orange Lantern with his energy. Because when Hal finally, came up with hope, with what do you hope for, what do you want? And basically Hal's like, I really want you to stop asking me that. Oh, okay, sincerity granted. And we saw Hal with some energy.
He had to sincerely want whatever he was hoping for. He genuinely did want that.
Yeah, he genuinely wanted them to stop. But that's when the ring got full power. That's when his ring was able to actually do something with it. So we've seen a Blue Lantern fight an Orange. So maybe the blue can fight the orange. Its hope and greed are very similar things. Hope is that eternal, that positive energy that makes you want something. Greed is that mine kind of attitude. So this is the version of yellow and orange. So maybe the Blue Lanterns can regularly fight the orange, whereas the Red Lanterns were completely destroying the blue because of the rage versus the hope. So I think we're dealing with different rings will go up against different people in different ways. Now,
do the Guardians know that?
I don't know if they know that.
Do the Guardians know the relationship of the emotions?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think they're just learning what's going on here, and I think
this
that's
is
part
a major.
of the scary
This is
thing.
a major part where maybe even the Corps might question the Guardians on this one. What are your motivations? Who are you? Why do we respect and follow you?
Yeah, well,
because they're dismissing them now. Are they going to be considered themselves suspect?
It's the as you said, with Hal had that comment about the children, leave the room. Mm-hmm. We're going to have some serious political uprisings going on. Mm-hmm. We've already started seeing it when they first introduced that law that said, no Green Lantern can have any type of relationship with another Lantern. All those Lanterns quit. There was they had a bunch of people saying, no, I'm not going to deal with this stuff. This is BS.
I seem to remember storytelling before where the Guardians left. And the Corps was run by Corps members. So I'm wondering if maybe
we may be going that way now.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what's going to happen with Blackest Night. Maybe it will be the end of the Corps as we know it. I don't know.
I don't know. A different I don't know. It's interesting. We got to talk about the epilogue at the end with Space Sector 666.
Yeah.
Where we've got Ash and our Sarek, and we see Ash writing like this what he considers a final letter to his wife, because I think he knows.
Well, his wife is dead.
Right.
So that's the thing.
He's been writing all along to his wife as kind of a way, and I do feel like this is a foreboding letter for him, because I did feel like it was, and I kind of hope I'm wrong because I like him, but I did realize this is kind of his final letter to his wife as they reach the Black Lantern, and Sarek starts to realize that they're in a classified location. How can that location be classified? Yeah. And that's, again, our Black Guardian
is blocking everything.
Yeah. So, and he starts to realize we've got a big problem because they can't connect with the Guardians, they can't connect with anybody, and all of a sudden, out of the ground, these hands rise up, flesh. Whose hands are they? Are they the Anti-Monitor's hands? Are they somebody else's? Because the Anti-Monitor's body, we did see it.
Yeah, we've seen bits and pieces of it.
But we actually saw the body. Remember way back when this lantern was shown for the first time. The body, didn't that become the internal parts of? Didn't the lantern surround the body? Wasn't the body encased by it?
I think so, yeah.
Isn't that what we saw happen?
Yeah, that's what created
are these the Anti-Monitor's hands?
No.
Or are they, it says Tale of the Black Lantern. Are they talking about the physical lantern? Or
I'm saying that's the beginning of the Black Lantern Corps.
But then
I'm thinking that's a Corps member, right?
Who is Black Hand? Isn't Black Hand the first Black Lantern?
I don't know. Maybe is that Black Hand?
Or is this the first Dead Rising?
I think that's the first Dead Rising. I think we're going to have a difference between the Dead Heroes Rising and Black Lanterns.
No, because I think the Dead Heroes Rising are the Black Lanterns. So is this the first Dead Rising? Is it the Anti-Monitor then as the Guardian? I don't know. See, I thought, didn't they say all these heroes that they've been showing with the rings, and it's obviously going to be some villains too probably, that are rising? Aren't they? Well, it is villains too, because we saw Mirror Master in one of them, the original Mirror Master. Aren't those the Black Lanterns?
That's what I always thought, but I'm just throwing out ideas now, so I don't know. Yeah. It's one of those things. This is the thing with Blackest Night. We have all these pieces, but we still don't know the final puzzle. We still don't know what we're finally dealing with. Now, I was thinking that Black Hand was the first and the original, Black Lantern, but maybe he's not. Maybe he's their Hal Jordan. Maybe he's their best of the best, because he's been such interwoven with death and destruction and the undead and the supernatural freakiness.
I think you're right. This Rising might be of the first Black Lantern, or their version of the Guardian or whatever. This might be the launching of
the Black Lantern Corps.
Right. I'm just curious who this is going to be. If this is going to be a central focus figure, kind of like what we've got. Like when the Sinestro Corps formed, there was Sinestro, who was the first, like what Black Hand is.
Right.
But then there was Parallax brought in, then the Anti-Monitor brought in. There was big guns brought in to be like the guardians of the Yellow Lanterns.
Right.
Are we going to get that here, is I guess my question. And is this the first one? Is it going to be the Anti-Monitor or something else? I don't know. It's interesting speculation. I loved, absolutely, the end of this Agent Orange. And I'm looking so forward to the next issue, because it's got to be running concurrent with Blackest Night, so we're going to see the Tale of the Black Lantern while we're reading Blackest Night. I love that we've got fireworks going on outside here. All right.
Yeah, whistle pops.
What about, is there anything else about Green Lantern Corps?
Green Lantern Corps. There's a couple of stuff with, especially issue 37. We had some cool stuff with, Sodom Yacht turned the Daxam's son from red to yellow. Used, invoked the power of Ion, and I thought that was a cool, twist. One, just it gave the Daxamites the yellow sun powers, but it was another thing that kind of irked me about these people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we first saw last issue they were, you know, basically flinging themselves off cliffs, just committing mass suicide. And if it wasn't for, you know, Sodom and, you know, what's her name, the female lantern that went with him, I can't think of it now, these people would have continued doing this. And they're trying to rally them, trying to give them hope, give them inspiration. Sodom flies up to the sun, basically looks like he kind of commits suicide, even though we know he really doesn't, because he's, you know...
It's the one who
he's
dated
iron.
Hell. Oh,
Yeah.
doggone it, I'm drawing a blank at the moment.
I know, I can't think of her name either.
Yeah, and I love that lantern, because I
Yeah.
remember her back when she dated Hell. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm completely drawing a blank, but anybody who knows, it's...
Yeah, Arissa.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Arisia.
Arissa, one of those things. It's something like that. But, you know, and so she's sitting there trying to, you know, basically organize them, and they start rallying against her. You know, they're sitting there, and you can see, you know, it was Sodom's father kind of was, you know, copying a little bit of attitude with her. Oh, we don't need you now. We have the power to strike out. My son did this. And I honestly wanted to reach into the comic once again and smack this guy. Because, you know, fortunately, she's got enough discipline, she's got enough intelligence, she's able to encase them in the energy bubbles and just keep them calm and say, no, you need some time, you need some training, you need some tactics, you need to get this organized. And luckily, she's able to keep them calm and able to actually organize them, but... I liked their initial lack of respect of her, too. See, when I say I want to reach and smack, I liked how they did that because it fits their people.
Oh, I'm with you, though.
They're the sniveling whiners who really annoy me because they now have a taste of some superpowers because they got the powers of Superman, but they're not, you know,
they weren't raised the same way.
Right, so you get these little, but I'm really looking forward to that, just seeing how she's able to take them and transform them. Now, the whole science cell with the riot and all that stuff, I've been actually loving that. Mm-hmm. That is a prison riot. First thing you do is you got to separate the inmates, you got to coordinate them off, you got to break it down. But
enhanced by the Black Lantern.
Right.
I'm sorry, not by the Black Lantern, by the Black Guardian. You know, or
Scar. By Scar.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that really angered me, and I mean, it was a Hawkman type rant, anger of call for backup, were the rookie lanterns. You know, these kids were like, "Hey, we're lanterns. We're here to fight." They hadn't even completed training yet, and so they were told, "Stand down, stay behind." And they had a veteran lantern put up an energy shield to keep them from getting involved in the fight. So what do these brainiacs do? They go, "Hey, let's attack one of our own. Let's attack the let's attack our own, you know, this veteran Green Lantern and cause him to break down his force shields." You know, of course, as soon as they did that, they're like, yeah, charge! And as they're flying, and they just see these yellow lanterns coming at them, and you could just see the look of fear and panic on these rookies' eyes. Now, the only thing that kind of that upset me about the scene is that the Alpha Lanterns showed up on time. And they were actually able to save the rookie lanterns and just start cutting down yellow lanterns. Personally, I would have wanted to see one or two of the rookies die. Just, you know, teach them...
As a wake-up call?
As a wake-up call. Teach them, one, you don't, you know, break ranks. Two, you're given an order. Part of being a good soldier is you got to learn to take when to take the orders. Had they sat there when their veteran was, you know, putting up the energy shield, instead of saying, let's fight him, they should have said, no, let's support him. Let's add our energy to his, you know, wall to make sure that there's nothing going to escape.
Question, though. What if that's being saved for when the Guardians order them to do something and they listen? And the veteran lanterns are smart enough to realize they don't.
Oh, I don't know. And to be honest,
I'd like to see a follow.
Right.
I guess what I
want to see follow.
My point is, if they didn't do it then, I want to see follow up.
Yeah, and to be honest, the look of, you know, just shock and horror as the yellow lanterns are being decimated, and just that fear, they're probably going to follow orders from now on. And we're going to see probably these rookie lanterns do what they're supposed to do.
Oh, I'm saying, though, but here's the problem is, what if they follow orders when they shouldn't?
What do you mean?
Like, because of the fact that they're rookies and, you know, we're still seeing that these kids are green, what if the Guardians don't treat them... Like, I agree with the veteran lanterns in this. I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
We're totally in the same page and in sync. What if the Guardians don't see it the same way in the middle of a war? Like, what if when the veteran lanterns would tell them to hang back, the Guardians tell them to go forth?
Yeah, that could happen. And,
you know, and the veterans are the ones that step back, or the veterans are the ones that say we need to step back, and they're overridden by Guardians.
Oh yeah,
what if that could be another pivotal event? I don't know. I'm kind of speculating on what could happen because of this. These kids aren't veteran enough. They haven't been enough wars. They didn't, go against the Sinestro Corps previously. They don't know yet what it really means to be at risk, to really go into battle as a Green Lantern. Yeah. They aren't ready. They're more green than you could possibly imagine. Yeah.
And
they're light green.
But that's also part of the overcoming fear. You have the ability to overcome fear. Okay, yeah. If you've only lived just
green.
Yeah. If you've only lived, just a simple life and you really haven't been confronted with, this true darkness and true anger and evil, are you really able to overcome fear? That first confrontation that you have in battle, that first time you're dealing with
like
true
the Paris
fear.
Hilton and Nicole Richie of the Guardians. Oh. That's so hot. Let's go into battle. You said the simple life. I'm like sitting thinking to myself, oh my god, jeez. It actually does fit their personality right now.
Actually, yeah.
Let's go in and battle.
Well, it's,
Sorry.
Oh, no. Yeah, that's very accurate.
It's huge.
Well, and you look at but on the serious side,
I don't know how much I was choking. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there.
Oh no.
It's funny though how I think what works so well about the different Corps members and the fact that you've got rookies and veterans and different cultures and races, and it's what I've liked always about the Green Lantern books, both of them, is as we see different cultures and different alien races and different experience levels, we see very real reactions. Each different race could be considered a different nation. We have to deal with them the same way. There's a lot of great messages in here about the importance of world peace and how we interact with each other in diplomacy and what's really needed to make things work. And how we need to sometimes not just blindly follow authority, but to question it. In the sense that it goes to our own country. A great message here for our own country is, when we elect a president, do your research. When we elect a senator, do your research. Yeah. When you elect a governor, do a research. Be more active. I think there is something positive about the fact in our last presidential election, just a truckload of people got out and voted. Whoever you voted for, whether you voted for McCain or you voted for Obama, it's one of those things where it's great that you got out and spoke your voice. You questioned authority. In either case, you said, I want this or I want this. And I think that's Green Lantern is a nice message about politics. It's a nice message about world interactions. In a day and age where really right now the world economy is the pits. I mean, we need to be interacting a lot better. Green Lantern is a great book with a real world message for today. And it is one of the interesting things about this book. So taking, the humor out of it, it does show some of the silliness of the people in our world today that kind of don't pay attention enough don't think before they act and, aren't or maybe a little too impulsive. And the people who are really smart and really making decisions and really questioning things are the ones that are surviving. It's not always about rushing into battle first. It's about rushing in and making a decision in a smart way. That's how you survive. That's how you really make an impact. And that's a cool message about the Green Lantern books right now. And it's something we could all walk away learning something from today. I want to talk about something in 42 that we didn't get a chance to mention. This little shot, that's Sinestro.
Yeah.
And Sinestro, Hal's saying, I'm not sure what this meant. This shot of Sinestro looking at him directly, and I'm sure it's him looking at him saying, I can't do this without you. And that's a shot of the future. What are we going to see with Hal and Sinestro?
It's got to
be Sinestro's redemption?
I got a theory.
Mm-hmm.
Sinestro joins the Blue Lanterns.
Wow.
That's my theory. That's how Sinestro... Yeah.
And Hal and Sinestro have to work together. Yeah. In order to... He needs the power...
Of the blue.
And
the blue needs the green, so they need to work together.
And
the two... And think about it.
What does Sinestro really hope for?
Yeah.
Order to the universe.
Yeah.
Sinestro can really... does Sinestro have more hope? So was Sinestro going to be redeemed as a green, or is he going to be
as a blue?
Yeah.
I'm because that whole blue undertone to his, granted he already has a, kind of, no, he's got a red face, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he had a blue face in that one, but that could have been just because it was the vision of the blue ring that was given at the Hal, but I'm thinking that Sinestro is going to become a Blue Lantern.
Do you have any hesitation? This is kind of funny talking about expense nowadays with, how much, we've been talking about the last couple episodes about the rising costs of comics and what's good and what's bad about it. The second stories we've been loving so far, and that's stayed consistent. We'll talk, next episode we'll talk about Detective Comics, and we'll delve more back into the Bat books and into the Superman books as well, and I'll finally get to Secret Six because we're running a little bit towards the end of our time here. But when we talk about that, there is a truckload of stuff coming out Black Lantern related. Are you, the least bit disturbed by that or excited? I mean, all these minis I'm talking about. Blackest Night Batman, Blackest Night Superman, Blackest Night...
I am excited to read them.
Blackest Night Ambush Bug, Blackest Night...
I'm very excited to read them, looking forward to them. Did not even hesitate. Will
Blackest
not hesitate
Gonzo.
to order them. Yeah. I'm not hesitating to order these things, but... As we said, I'm in a little different position than other people. So I could see people who, if you're on a budget, going, man, I love the Green Lantern. I get all these things.
I did shop differently this month when I bought. Now it's not this, I didn't change my expense totals are the same as they've been, but like I said, it did affect trades and hardcover purchases.
Yeah.
It's not saying I didn't get any, but I significantly cut back on what I normally get because of it. It didn't affect my monthlies. The way I budgeted myself this time was because of the fact that there's so much cool stuff coming out that I want to read and I know I'll read right away. That was my priority. So I went with all the things that I was going to read right away, which is I read the main DC line. I got all those because I want to follow what's going on in the whole universe. So I got all those because there's some great offerings. My Vertigo books that I normally get. Few of my Wildstorm books that I like reading regularly. I don't get the entire Wildstorm line, but I get a number of them because I like those. A trade paperback that's still, if you haven't ordered it, it's out this month that I actually want to recommend from Wildstorm, and I'll do it real quick, is Highwaymen. If you didn't read that one, Jim and I really love that mini. It's a great action movie mini, and the writing on that's really good. And if you haven't, if you read the, I believe they did Push. The Push prequel book, or the Push comic book. I think it's the same writing team that did that. But those guys, I'd love to see a sequel to The Highwaymen, and I hope that it did well enough, or the trade does well enough, that we can get a sequel to that, because it's really cool. But that did. It's one of those things where I'm excited as can be for the Blackest Lantern stuff, but that's where I think the price change has affected me, is more on collected editions.
Right. And
I prioritize those on ones that I know I'll read. For sure.
And if I wasn't doing this show, I still would have picked those things up without hesitation.
Yeah.
There's maybe some titles out there, sometimes with some of these limited series that I don't know if I would pick up if I was doing the show. I would have maybe waited till the trade for some of the
and I have no hesitation on the show. I'm being totally honest about it. I would have, and I think people sometimes, it's funny, those comments have stopped on the show, which I think people get it now.
Yeah.
So I'm hesitating to even bother saying this because I think people understand. If I honestly was reading a title right now that I wanted to drop and that I was just picking up for the show, I would say I'm just picking this up for the show.
Right.
I'd have no hesitation saying that. I'm not paid by anybody to say anything on here. I don't care. I genuinely am excited to read these things. That's why I think it's an interesting discussion point to say, how has this changed me? It has changed.
Yeah.
Because I want to stay within the same budget that I've had. I don't want to go over my budget. I wouldn't mind expanding it if it's something I knew I was going to read right away. It's worth the extra expenditure. But I'm changing what I grab to stockpile. And I'll just where it'll affect by shopping with DCBS will be when I want to buy something to read. I'll go to In Stock Trades and grab it. I'm not pre-ordering as many. I'm still giving them the same amount of money.
Yeah.
Anyway, you cut it, but I'm not pre-ordering as much. So that is an interesting little switch or a change. Green Lantern though. Oof.
Yeah, because
I want to see how it affects the Batman books, and I'm glad they're not derailing the mini to do that. Do you think what's affecting that, though, is my confidence is very high because, like in Final Crisis, I enjoyed all the tie-ins for Final Crisis. But sticking strictly to Green Lantern, I thought in Sinestro Corps, the one-shots that they wrote for that were essential.
Right. And I think part of it is because we've seen what they do with these one-shots. We've
They're
seen
worth
them.
It. It's not fluff.
And it adds to it, yeah. It adds to the story. It's the rest of the story. Now you know the rest of the story.
Mm-hmm. Final Crisis, it was Revelations for me. It filled in that gap with that month off. Yeah. What was going on then? And it actually added to my understanding of the Justifiers and what was going on there. And it took another religion and showed how it affected it. You know, the same way we got to see a little bit of how it was affected by the Wonder Woman universe as well. So it was kind of cool. So it's fun. We'll talk some more on Speeding Bullets next week because we got a lot of stuff to talk about. After we're done with Long Halloween next episode, we're going to do a couple weeks of Speeding Bullets before we jump back into For Tomorrow. While we're doing For Tomorrow, we will probably do some short like this Speeding Bullets segments along the way to talk about any of the big events that are going on in DC, and then we'll do the same thing. We'll try to do our extended walkthroughs partnered with a couple episodes that are specifically devoted to current books and Speeding Bullets to stay up with it because we want to talk about the current topics just as much as you do and kind of give people a little bit of everything on the show. But we'll do a couple full episodes, Speeding Bullets, along with some short segments on our more extended episodes to keep up with this stuff because it's way too much to talk about that you and I want to discuss. I've got Vigilante I want to talk about next episode if we have time because that's a book that I'm really digging in a major way.
We got more Superman titles. We got Secret
JSA,
Six.
Secret Six. There's Secret Six is my favorite book right now, and I definitely. It's funny. I'm saving Secret Six because I want a lengthy discussion about Secret Six. So we're getting to Secret Six. If it's not next week, it'll be the week after for sure. Just because if I can't get it in on next week's show, I want to give it a lengthy discussion because I'm loving so much what's going on. So we might be talking 3 issues of Secret Six when we actually get to it. But that is just a fantastic book. So that discussion is coming as well.
Nothing like the handy-dandy electro claw for carving through metal doors.
Jim, before I talk about our sponsor, DCBService.com, I want to let everyone know that they're having their 10th anniversary celebration at DCBS on July 11th. And their store address is DCBS In Stock Trades. It's 611 Highway View Drive, Suite B, Fort Wayne, Indiana, 46818. And it's really something for any of you that are local. They're doing a big thing. They've got Steve Bryant, Robert Akins, Mike Norton, and they're trying to get a couple more confirmations going in for that. So they're trying to do a big event. But the cool thing is they have some of the specials there. It's going to be 90% off dig and dent items, 10 cents off of back issues, extra discounts on toys, statues, prints, and T-shirts, $1 or buy one, get one free on specially marked manga. Now here's how classy they are. One of the things that I like about them is they sent emails out saying send promotional material for your podcast. And they sent this out saying whether you're one of the ones that shout us out or not. So, they want to support the podcast community regardless if, they're part of your show sponsor program or if they just are. I think that's really, DCB Service has always been really good about supporting podcasts. And it's one of the reasons why when, they offered to sponsor us, without hesitation, I was already shopping with them. And whether you believe that or not, you heard me talk about them before they were sponsors of the show. So I would hope that you would take that as genuine. But they are, Cameron is just, I met him at CGS shows, just a wonderfully nice guy. And Zach, who sent us this email, is a great guy. So I wanted to shout out their 10th anniversary. If you're not already shopping at those sites, they're really great. Remind you to take a look at DCBService.com at Billy Batson, The Magic of Shazam, and Tiny Titans. Issue 7 for Billy Batson and 19 for Tiny Titans. They're both regularly $250, 40% off only $150. Those books are wonderful. They're still printed on the newsprint, but it's great because they're wonderful titles that I just enjoy. We talk about books. They're books I wouldn't hesitate to keep getting because I don't get them for my students. I buy them in trade for my students. I get the monthlies for me because I read them without hesitation. They're great books. DCB Service is a wonderful pre-order source, so it's DCBService.com. This week, it should be probably towards the end of the week, maybe the weekend, they'll have up the new books. that they're going to be posting up there. So it's kind of your last chance if you didn't order for this month, if you want to check them out for your first order, whether you like collected editions or their collected edition discounts if you pre-order them at dcbservice.com they're usually like somewhere around 50% off. It's crazy. So, go check 40 to 50% off of trades and hardcovers is fantastic. Sometimes 75% off. I mean, how else would you buy them in this economy right now? We want to remind everyone at InStockTrades.com, Absolute Superman for tomorrow, or the trades. Absolute Superman's regularly $75, 47% off because of their supporting our show, $39.75. The trade paperbacks, Volume 1 and Volume 2, remember it's 2 volumes if you want to get the whole story, it's $14.99 regularly for each one, $7.94 a piece at 47% off. It's almost like you're getting buy one, get one free. So that's really cool. RagingBullets.com. Listener-produced columns, Where's What Not Nows, and there's new Where's What Not Nows up there. I want to listener-produced columns, Life in the Gutter. Our own Super Mandy there is putting them up regularly. DC release dates, show news, and more. We're always looking for submissions and participation. Please send them to ragingcontest@gmail.com. Voicemails, I'm sorry they weren't on this show. We wanted to get them on there. We're having a little bit of a technical difficulty. I think I could have recorded them on this, but I didn't want them to be all garbled. So it's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. I promise they'll be on next episode. So we'll get listener voicemails on for sure. Don't worry about your ones that you haven't gotten on there. They'll be there. Our next contest winner for the show is going to be chosen in July for our August selection. And it's going to be chosen in July for our September selection. It'll be our August selection for September because we have a new one that's coming up. That our July book that we're going to air in August is going to be chosen by us. And I've already given you the hints. And actually, we're going to make this a contest for listeners. We've had from Unknown Fanboy Chad Burdett some comics that I've been wanting to do something with on the show. Some of our donations that we've gotten from listeners, we donated to the Hero Initiative. Our good friends over at Comic News Insider were doing an auction at the New York Comic Con. So we gave some of those things to them because it was all going to the Hero Initiative and a charity for that purpose. But I did want to shout out that we're going to take some of Chad Burdett's stuff, and I've got some trades of my own that are brand new that I haven't read, that I've got the single issues, and I'm like, I'm going to do this for the contest. So I'll let the listeners choose from a few different choices. The top 3 listeners who select first what our book's going to be. I have had no one selected yet. The clues have been, one of the main characters shares a name with TV's Dukes of Hazzard, a character from TV's Dukes of Hazzard. One of the main characters shaves. What am I saying shaves for? I'm inventing a new word.
Yeah.
This is like what you were doing before. If anyone knows what shays mean, where's what now for that? But anyway, one of the main characters shares a name with one of the actors who played one of TV's original Hardy Boys from the Hardy Boys TV show. My third clue. The third main character of this book has a name that's uncommon with a flower. So that's the 3 main characters of this book that you would have followed monthly. One shares a name with TV's Dukes of Hazzard, a character from that. One shares a name with the last name. I'll even say it's the last name of one of the actors from TV's Hardy Boys. And the name of a flower for the third character, who is a female. So I'll even make it a little easier. I'm looking for 3 listeners, the first 3 listeners who email me with the correct name of this book that we are going to be doing. That is going to be our late July. So after we start airing for tomorrow, we'll officially announce it. And this will be our book that we are going to be reading and doing for August. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited for this
I am
one.
actually.
Because you know what this book is.
Yeah, now I do.
This one's, yeah. So it's 3 characters from that one. It's going to be a big book. It's one people have wanted us to do. So I'm excited for this one, and I've wanted to do so. It's going to be a good book. So definitely looking for listeners for that, and I will let you do our pick from our grab bag. So this will be something where any listener who wants to participate can get something free from Raging Bullets. And thank you for Unknown Fad Boy Chad Burdett, because it's his books that I'm going to be using along with some of my trades for this contest. And I'll let you pick from what I've got selection wise. So Jim, and I want to read a quick email. Dear Sean and Jim, I'm a longtime comics fan. My love of books started back in the early 70s when my oldest brother gave me Marvel's Greatest Comics reprints of Galactus Trilogy. Since the I've been hooked, even though I did have a brief I am so tongue-tied at the moment. This is what happens when you record for as many hours as we do. Since then, I've been hooked. Even though I did have a brief hiatus in the late 80s, when my wife brought me an iPod, I became hooked on podcasts as a way to keep up on the books that I'm not buying and to keep in touch with the community. As my wife and kids think that my comic addiction is insane, I'm sending this email to several podcasts I've been listening to. I've written some of you before, but for some, this is the first time. The brother who gave me my first books passed away a few years ago from pancreatic cancer. Since then, I participated in the annual cancer fundraiser in his honor. It's a fundraiser walk. This year, I thought it would be a good idea to send an appeal to you to see if you would consider mentioning my fundraiser or putting a link on your website. I recently participated in the Star Trek review for the Two Guys Talking podcast, and Mike Wilkerson was kind enough to have me record an appeal and is going to put a link in the show notes. I realize that I'm asking a lot, but this is very important to me. If you can't do it, I appreciate you taking the time to read my note. Rest assured, I will continue listening to your podcast. Keep up the work. Sincerely, Paul T. Spataro. And I'm sorry if I butchered your last name. But I will put the link there, and it's for pancreatic cancer, and I'm a big believer in any of these walks. And I apologize. Paul sent me this a while ago, and I didn't. There's been 10 million things I've been doing this month. I didn't have a chance to get to it, but I did want to make sure to air this and get that on there, especially because it was appeal for pancreatic cancer, which I'm a believe in. And thank you so much for doing that, Paul. And Jim, let's wrap up here because I'm incredibly tongue-tied. Next week, end of long Halloween and more speeding bullets. You know, I was going to edit out all these flubs and think to myself, should I edit them out? But I think it's so funny that people are going to listen to the end of the show and go, geez, Sean ended off the show sucking on marbles. Because I usually do edit this stuff out. It is really funny because I always call you on this when it happens, and it's totally me this time. So if anybody wants to do a Where's What Not Now with a picture of me with marbles in my mouth, go right ahead. Because I think it's absolutely hysterical. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to this episode, and we will see you next week.
Bye.